Okay, well, I have a... So we're on the record. We're ready.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of this municipal building and by sending a copy to the Montclair Times. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streaming live and will be available on demand at montclairnjusa.org. First up is roll call.
Okay. Chair Wynn, Vice Chair Brodock,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz is not here, Mr. Brandon is not here, Councilor Schlager,
Here.
Ms. Willis, Mr. Rooney, Mr. Ian Wally,
Here.
Ms. Lockman,
Here.
Mr. Barr is excused, and Mr. Gilmer.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. I expect other people will be filtering in here over the next 15 minutes or so, due to our early start here at 7 p.m. instead of 7:30. First up, we have approval of the minutes from the February 26th meeting.
I have revised minutes from Ms. Lockman, and additional revisions, I believe, came from you, Mr.
Yep.
Brodock. Are there any additional changes to the minutes?
Motion to approve is amended.
Motion by Mr. Brodock,
Second.
Second.
by Mr. Ian Wally. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Next to the minutes from March 12th.
And again, I know that there were revisions to the March 12th minutes from Ms. Lockman and from you, Mr. Brodock, as well. Are there any other additional changes to the minutes?
Motion to approve is amended.
So moved.
Okay. Second by Ms. Lockman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Next up, we have the revised zoning and land use regulation ordinance.
Oh, do I have the resolutions on the agenda?
Yeah, but that's the...
Okay. You want to do the resolutions first? Or do you want to?
Sure, we can step
Mr.
that.
Neese is, well, you'll be here for both of them.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's move into the resolution for application 2541 Mitchell McGregor, 448 Washington Avenue. Just so folks know who are in the audience, if you're here on this matter, I think the only thing that needs to be done here is to review the resolution of the action of the board, and that is something that doesn't require public input, just so folks are aware. So what we'll be doing here is discussing the resolution that's been circulated and then voting on it, which all it is to affirm what the decision was.
I believe what I mailed out were two versions of the resolution, one that came from Arthur, and one that, Tony, you had your changes to the resolution as well. And I believe you have both versions.
I actually had three.
Okay,
I got, I think the last version that I got was from Carmel.
okay.
Well, I had just sent you an email with a change that you incorporated in the version that you sent to Tony, and you sent
Oh,
it
so
out.
it was
taken care of in your version.
terrific,
Yes.
terrific.
So the most recent version is Tony's version? Okay. Okay, are there any changes to the resolution beyond what we have in Tony's version? And do you agree?
I'm comfortable with it. Is there a motion to approve the resolution as amended?
So moved.
Is there s-
I wasn't
Oh.
here that night to hear this, so I
Okay.
have to refrain
I
from
think
voting.
those that voted, let's see, I think we three can vote.
We agree. And Carol.
Yeah,
if
Carol
she
can,
could.
but she's not here. Is
Right.
that right?
Who,
Those that voted
Do you have the minutes from that meeting, Janice?
Yeah,
Do you-
March
It was
12th?
Carol, you, me,
Yeah.
and Dan
That's
who
correct.
voted against it.
Yeah, Daniel
That's
was.
correct.
Dan, oh, you were, well, Daniel can vote too.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's
four
us
of us.
three.
But
All right, so I need a second.
I
Second.
Yeah.
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
Now the revised zoning and land use regulation ordinance.
In an effort to keep this project moving, what I did is I revised the zoning ordinance to eliminate the recommendations to change the lot frontage requirements for the residential zone districts. I think clearly from what the board member said and the zoning subcommittee said, we have to look at that in more detail. So I pulled that out of the ordinance. And in fact, my staff, Graham and I, are working on an evaluation identifying all properties that could be subdivided with that new frontage requirement. So we'll come back to the board sometime this year when we've completed that analysis. But there's a lot of other things in here, particularly the zoning along Bloomfield Avenue, the reduction of the building heights along Bloomfield Avenue that we've been really pushing for, and I think the board is very supportive of getting the council to approve. So I'd like to advance this without, you know, as I submitted to you, without the new lot frontage requirements. Basically, the lot frontage requirements reflect what was in here prior to the proposed draft. I also took this opportunity to add a new section on performance guarantees. Because as of January of this year, the municipal land use law has been amended and now only allows municipalities and planning boards to require performance guarantees for development projects if it's required in your ordinance. Previously, we relied on the municipal land use law as giving us the authority to ask for that. So this whole section that's in here really reflects the revised municipal land use law.
That's 89.
So, Janice, will performance bonds be required under our ordinance then?
Well, it's not required, but you have the
The
ability to
option.
ask for them. Yes,
Yeah.
now you can.
Okay.
With this in here, with
Yeah.
this not in here, you can't.
You just relied on formerly you relied on the
Right,
MLUL.
right.
And it's been changed, so now
And
you
also,
have
I
to
mean,
put it in the ordinance.
these
Yeah.
new regulations more narrowly define when you can require performance guarantees and maintenance guarantees. It's much more limiting than it was in the past. So, again,
So
we're
it's
just-
more favorable to the developer, not having
Yes.
to require, to be
Yes.
required of it, yeah.
Okay. So those are the changes, and what I'd like to do is bring this to the council for discussion at their conference meeting in May, and hopefully to be introduced at their regular meeting in May.
So Janice, where did the language on the bonding come from?
It came from the municipal land use law.
That's directly taken from the municipal land use law?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. Just some minor changes on me to refer to the township, to personalize it to Montclair
Yeah.
Township rather than just.
So there's no reason that we need to actually, read that language with a fine-tooth comb?
You can
because-
if you want to.
Well,
but
I
it's
don't
really
want
verbatim
to
from the
unless I
municipal
have
land
to.
use law. And I think you can rely on,
We can rely on the lawyers who put this
the
together.
township council, the township attorney will be
Okay.
reviewing it closely as
All right.
well. Okay,
Just hate to approve something.
right.
So other than 347, the new inclusions, where does the Bloomfield Avenue, where does that, because I was looking through the first few pages of the,
I didn't send you the whole ordinance. I just sent you those pages where I made the changes, where if you look at the old one, because remember it was very thick?
right.
So I only sent you the pages where I made the changes, and you can see, basically there had been a table before, and there were requirements for the different frontages. Within the R1, we had all the different frontage requirements because we took it off the map. So now all those those are back on the map, so I don't have those tables anymore. I just have the requirements for the front yard setback, the side yard, which was in there before.
So these are changes, but they're just, you're re-including what was taken out temporarily, right? Is that, so these aren't, the numbers that we see here in terms of minimum side yard setback, et cetera, those are the same provisions that existed before, just that
Right.
they've been reinserted. Okay.
Right, I
All
just had to
Okay.
reconfigure
That's
it a
why
little
they're,
bit.
that's why they're underlined.
So for the avoidance of all doubt, the front yard setbacks and side yard setbacks that are now in what is going before the council are exactly what was there in the prior zoning? Is that what you're asserting?
Yes,
And the only difference is the height differential for buildings on Bloomfield Avenue?
well, that's the major, there are other things in
I'm
here.
just
We
clarifying.
did add language to this ordinance, I think we had talked about it before, that states that pre-existing non-conforming lots with front yard setbacks or side yard setbacks that don't meet are grandfathered in. So that was something that the subcommittee wanted to add a statement that pre-existing non-conforming conditions can continue. So we did add some statements to that, but in terms of changes, there were no changes to the front yard setbacks or the side yard setbacks or the frontage requirements. We did add there were some changes that came out of the master plan that we talked about before to the C1 zone district and allowing properties that have less than 20,000 square feet floor area. They were exempt from the density requirement. So there were a couple of things that were in there that we discussed previously that haven't been taken out. And those are in the master plan.
I just happened to be looking at the map. The C1 looks like, well, the former C1 is blue, but I don't see the color on the key, and it should be purple or something, right? CBD 4C. And that strip along Bloomfield Avenue, I was expecting to see in purple.
I'll have to, I'll double check the color. I mean, it is that, if you look at it closely, that Bloomfield Avenue corridor is CBD 4C. It's just the colors, yeah, they don't look like they match. I'll have another look at the colors.
Yeah, they're pretty different. So maybe that square needs to be the blue square.
Well, blue is public, that's purple. The
Yeah.
purple looks a little pinky on the legend, so we'll take a look at the colors.
Yeah, I think that the strip on Bloomfield looks like it should be keyed to purple.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that from the last time we looked at the maps.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the coloring was slightly off.
But we can easily take care of that.
And just for the record, Mr. Brandon and Mr. Schwartz are here.
Okay.
So can we get a final totality of what's being proposed before the council? Everything, not just the pieces.
Absolutely. Do you want to discuss it, or I could send it to you tomorrow. Do you want to discuss the whole?
When is our next meeting?
Well, it's the 23rd, and it's going to be at the firehouse for the Mountainside Hospital application.
So I'd recommend, given the complexity of this and the changes, that you send a final everything, that we look it over quickly between now and then and table this for now and have a quick vote next time.
Here's my suggestion. Perhaps, because remember, that's a big meeting.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to.
I mean, if the only changes are removing the R1 and R2 frontages, I think that was the only concern that we had that changed from when we recommended it to the council the first time. I would say let's move it forward, let's get it to the council, and if there's something that we need to change when we tackle the R1, R2 lot frontages, we can tackle it then.
Yeah,
It's going to come back to you.
Yeah, I'd like to move this along. I mean, I personally have
It's
spent a lot of
it's
time.
coming back to us from the council?
Zoning change.
not if it emanates from the town, from the
No.
planning board. It doesn't have to come back.
Goes to them, they vote on it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to come back to the planning board if the planning board prepared it.
Okay. So we did that? Okay.
And just to clarify, I think we have a special meeting next week.
No, that's been canceled.
Ah,
Okay. Yeah, so we're not meeting next week. But the council meeting is May 1st. This is the time frame. The council conference meeting is May 1st, so I'd like to have this for discussion at the May 1st council meeting.
Can we pass it with the caveat that any minor changes will be made at the next meeting if any errors or and
Absolutely.
corrections are discovered?
I mean, I think that what I can do is tomorrow I'll send you a link to this whole document.
Yeah.
I'll have, we'll change the map, make any corrections to the map, and I'll send it to you tomorrow. You can contact me if you have any changes, and the problem is the meeting April 23rd at the firehouse. I don't think we can really put this on the agenda at that meeting. And then your next meeting's after the May 1st council meeting.
Okay, well, if things change, so if something's discovered that is in error, we can always deal with it in a quick vote and hold it back again if need be. So
Absolutely.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So let's take a look at the final
Okay.
document, move it along, pending any inaccuracies or errors discovered.
And you always have the ability, even if after it's introduced and adopted, if there's something wrong, then we can always make that change.
That's
Yeah.
not a good strategy to do. I've seen
I don't
that
think
before.
it's recommended as a strategy, but you always have that option.
Yeah.
It's never set in stone.
Hey, Janice, I have a related question. Are there any pending applications along the Bloomfield Avenue corridor for buildings in excess of 6 feet? Or in excess of 4 feet? Four stories?
Not right now, no.
Because they would be grandfathered in at this
Right.
point, yeah. But you
And
say not
believe-
right now.
If they submitted an application before this goes into effect, so that's why it would be, if it's adopted in May, then there's a 20-day period to appeal. It won't be in effect until sometime in June, so between
It's better to move it along.
Yeah.
now and June,
Yep.
okay?
And you're not aware of anything.
Nobody's come to my office. Anybody who's come into my office, I've told them to keep it to 4 stories or less. Okay? All right. So, you want to perhaps you should take a roll call on that? On the
As an
recommend-
informal vote.
All right. If someone would make a motion to forward this recommendation, this recommended zoning ordinance to the council?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? John and Craig. Okay.
And just for the record, Chair Nguyen, Mr. Rooney, and Ms. Willis are here.
Okay. Good.
Great. Next up is application 2543, Lackawanna SPE LLC.
You too.
I believe Mr. Ian Wally is leaving the dais, as is Mr. Neese.
Rooney came, I gotta go.
And we have Mr. Galvin representing us for this application.
Yes, we do.
Great.
They already approved that resolution.
I know. Mr. Troutner.
Thank you and good evening. As a continuation of our application for preliminary and final major site plan approval, before we get started, actually, I'd like to ask the board's indulgence. Mr. Stolar, on behalf of the applicant, I was hoping you might say a few words regarding passing of Todd Anderson, the relationship to this application.
Sure.
Just wanted to say publicly, everybody who knew Todd, who was sitting right next to me here at the last meeting, he passed away very suddenly and very unexpectedly, And forget about all the emotional part. He was just a wonderful guy and was very, very committed to this. And when A&P filed for bankruptcy the second time, just as we were getting going, as some of you folks know, we were getting ready for the A&P Superfresh, working with the rest of the team at Hampshire. He was really committed to help making this happen. And I miss him. We all miss him. And Mr. Rob Schmidt, who's the principal of Hampshire, would just like to say a couple of words.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I just wanted to say we all do miss Todd. It was tragic, and I wish I didn't have to be here tonight, because Todd was the driving force behind this project with Brian. But despite the tragedy, we need to move on, and I just wanted to give the board Hampshire's full commitment to continue on with this project. We want to deliver a great product here. We love this site. I've been overseeing Hampshire's retail properties for the last 15 years. We have a ton of resources to get this done, despite the tragic loss of Todd, and we fully intend to make this happen and bring this to fruition in Todd's memory, if nothing else. So we're really looking forward to making this happen, and again, we pray for Todd and his family, but we're moving forward. We're going to make this happen. So just wanted to share that with the board.
Thank you.
So, by way of overview and in terms of our plan for this evening, we'd like to bring back up Kevin Webb from Langen Engineering to answer some outstanding questions that were left unresolved at the prior planning board meeting regarding site engineering issues. We also have testimony tonight from Stephen Landicki from Langen. He's our landscape architect who will address landscape-related questions. And then we also have Carl Pankey from Langen Engineering. He'll testify this evening on the subject of traffic. In terms of what we will not get to this evening, just to spare any concern or confusion during the testimony, we do not intend to get to a parking testimony this evening. We have recently retained a parking management consultant. We're finalizing that plan. We ultimately anticipate at a future meeting presenting a parking plan that is going to conform and comply with Mr. Giosa's recommendations and requirements, and hopefully will please the board. But we want to do that holistically and without open or unresolved issues. And then the other topic, which we won't get to, although there may be some anticipation of us getting to it, and we will come back, is related to the pedestrian access to the tunnel. As you can maybe appreciate, there's some 40-year-old and greater documents that we're looking at, and we just want to make sure that we speak clearly and coherently without any open questions when we speak to the issue. So with that being said, hopefully we'll get hit the rest of the issues that came up at the meeting, and without further ado, I would ask that Mr. Webb come up, and he's previously sworn, but if he needs to be resworn, we can take care of that.
The only thing you should do is state your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. Kevin Webb, W-E-B-B.
And you continue under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you. As Tom mentioned, there were certain questions about specific issues. We actually do have an exhibit that was not presented last time. I would consider it a work in progress. It's basically a copy of our site plan with some modifications to it. The reason we haven't submitted, frankly, we want to get the board's input on a few issues, and so then we can finalize that and ultimately incorporate it into a revised set of plans.
And Kevin, that's marked, is that on the board right now, and which, Janice, I think we would mark as A21?
Right, so A21, it's site plan exhibit.
Do you have a paper copy of A21?
I have an electronic copy of.
Okay. Okay. I just need to have a copy of
so
it.
We will provide and again,
Sure.
we apologize. Unfortunately, we felt like it would be difficult to do this testimony without reflecting anything to point at, but
I will provide you a paper copy.
A21 is.
So it's A21. It's site plan exhibit prepared by Langen, dated today. And it's essentially the CS 101, which is the site plan that's incorporated into the previously submitted drawings, albeit with some changes, which I'll review quickly.
So you're saying we have no document of what you're talking about in our possession? Is that right?
Correct.
said it's similar to C-101. We could look at this.
CS 101,
CS
right,
101.
with some modifications, which I'll review.
And that document will be submitted so that the board has ample opportunity to review, and Mr. Webb will be here at the next meeting, so to the extent questions come up between tonight and the next meeting, obviously there'll be opportunity to answer those questions.
So the area where this exhibit differs from what was previously submitted is really the grocery store loading area along Glen Ridge on the northern end of the site. In fact, on the previously submitted plan, we actually had, along Glen Ridge Avenue, we actually had two openings. One sort of on the eastern edge, which was basically the existing driveway opening that was to remain, and we had widened another driveway opening where it exists today, and there was an island left in the middle. And based on some comments, what we heard at the last hearing, and some further discussions with some of the neighbors, we reevaluated how that truck access should work, how to make it more efficient, how to make it safer, how to make the pedestrian crossing better. And so what we've come up with is a single driveway opening of what is now 78 feet, whereas before we had a 70-foot driveway and a 33-foot driveway. So the combined opening before was actually larger than what we have today, although in a single driveway it's larger than either of them were in this proposed condition. What's shaded in gray along Glen Ridge Avenue would be a concrete driveway apron, so we'd have a formal depressed curb driveway apron to help identify the pedestrian way for pedestrians as they continue along Glen Ridge Avenue in either direction. It will be well marked. The other difference that we've done is to accommodate, there were comments regarding how we would deal with snow removal and can we create a stockpile area. And what we've done in this area on the east of the loading dock is to create a space. It's about 550 square feet that would be curbed off on the loading dock side with the pressed curb. It would be grass pavers, and it would provide an opportunity for snow removal and maintenance of that dock area to keep it open, and in fact the adjacent shared spaces without interrupting the landscape. So that's all new green space from the plan that was originally presented. There's no reduction in the landscaping along the Glen Ridge Avenue corridor as a result of that. We have shown, I know it was raised before about we had not shown screening for the compactors and the composter. This plan shows that screening here. It would enclose those. We'd have gates along the front. To clarify, so how this is different from the current grocery store configuration is the current grocery store has its stocks oriented in the east-west direction. So trucks have to come in, traverse onto the neighbor's property, and then back in. What we've done, and we've done that with the council of some potential tenants, this arrangement was vetted through them. This was actually a much preferred arrangement, was to rotate it 90 degrees. This is the same configuration and same layout of improvements in terms of the dock specific spaces as what was previously submitted. That doesn't represent a change, but just to reiterate. So we now have docks essentially in the north-south direction. So we have two formal loading docks. There's also a ramp up that would be for essentially hand trucks and hand carts and things like that. There are opportunities for smaller trucks to park in front of the compactors to offload their smaller items without interrupting the activities at the formal loading docks. So we anticipate trucks would generally be coming from Grove Street to Glen Ridge, and those tractor trailers would make a left off Glen Ridge, onto Glen Ridge, excuse me, and then back into these two spaces. And the 70-foot wide opening that we have does accommodate movements for those tractor trailer movements that can be done if either one is occupied, the other is accessible. We have tested that with the large tractor trailers, the 53-foot trailers that are permitted on roads in New Jersey. We will certainly provide, as part of a revised plan submission, those truck turning templates demonstrating those maneuvers. One of the other changes to this plan relative to what was previously submitted is there are 3 parallel spaces today along the southern side of Glenridge Avenue in the current island configuration. The prior plan would only preserve one of those spaces. This plan actually does that one better, so we lose only one. It's a net loss of 1 spaces were we to, with the board's wishes, move forward with this alternative plan.
So I have a question. At the last meeting, I asked, and I don't know, I think this is for you, but since you're talking about that area, are you going to prohibit the trucks from making a left-hand turn when they get out? So they're not going to go up Glenridge Avenue into the commercial and residential area of, I guess it's Greenwood?
What we've done, we've tried to do sort of a regional analysis of where we think trucks would be coming to this facility from, and I generally agree with you, is that they'll be coming from Grove Street in a north-south direction, depending on where they're coming from, or potentially be better suited for Bloomfield Avenue. So I think we respect and understand that that restriction makes sense. The one thing we don't know is, because we don't know who the tenant is, exactly where their distribution facilities will be. So I think that's a common sense plan. I don't know we're committed to be able to say that there should be a formal restriction on that without knowing the tenant. But in general, we would expect the traffic to turn right out of that.
Right. But, okay. I mean, I would just like to make a note of it. I think that it should be prohibited from them making a left-hand turn, because then a natural turn would also be a right into the residential area, or going up through Glenridge Avenue and going into the center of, that corner there where there's a lot of traffic issues anyway.
How about a certain size truck,
Yeah, I'm thinking
I think the tractor trailers, right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
Certainly, that's what our expectation is in talking about that restriction, the potential restriction of tractor
I
trailer.
mean, vans can certainly,
Vans and regular box trucks, I think,
box
could.
trucks could go, yeah.
Yeah, but when you're thinking big tractor trailers, when
Yeah.
they're braking, they make noise. You don't want them going through a residential area.
No.
They're very disruptive.
Good.
My question is Glenridge a county road?
Glenridge is not. Glenridge is a local road. Grove Street and Bloomfield Avenue are county.
Sometimes that's a problem to restrict when you're on a county roadway. That's just asking.
When you provide the turning templates, please make sure that you account for parking on both sides of the street, because there's often fully parked because of the post office.
We understand and have considered that in our design of this. So yes, it will be reflected.
So what would that condition be? There's to be no left-hand turn out or no left-hand turn in?
Right, no left-hand turn when they're going out.
So when you say out, you're talking about north, north, south, east, or west on?
When they're leaving the loading area and I guess going up Glenridge Avenue.
No left onto Glenridge Avenue by tractor trailers.
Southwest, if you want to be specific. Towards more south.
Just so there's no confusion.
So if there's no further comments on the loading area, I can speak to some other points here.
I have a question. There was another, do you still show the transformer?
We are, yes.
It's still there, it wasn't, but you weren't able to put it underground as was suggested at the last meeting?
What we've had preliminary discussions with the power company, and the preliminary feedback, it's not been a final answer. Preliminary feedback is they are generally loath to put the equipment underground because it's much, much harder for them to maintain, particularly in times of a power outage. That's the preliminary answer we've gotten, that it's physically feasible but not desirable from the power company's perspective.
Okay, thank you.
So if you have to leave it, would you screen it in some fashion to make it a little more visually appealing?
Well, we have a significant amount more landscaping, more effective landscaping around it. We do have to allow the power company to have access to,
Of course.
to it. So we'll certainly enhance it to the extent that we can while still maintaining the access requirements that the power company has.
Okay.
There was a question raised at the last meeting whether or not we had met with the fire company, and at that time we hadn't, but we now have. And I'm pleased to report that through our discussions, we've evaluated exactly how they intend to serve this building in a case of emergency. And it would be using the Bloomfield Avenue driveway with their aerial ladder truck. And what we've confirmed is that movements from Bloomfield Avenue, that the ladder truck can traverse northbound through this main aisle, make a left-hand turn to park and put its outriggers out in front of the building, and can exit the site in this counterclockwise direction out through that same Bloomfield Avenue exit without any modifications to our current plan. So there's adequate clearance to accommodate all those turning movements, and we have tested that. And again, we will present those turning movements as part of a revised plan submission. What that does is there was also discussion about fire lanes, particularly along the front of the building. So certainly on the western, let's call it 3/4 of the frontage along the grocery store would be striped as a fire lane. This eastern portion would not, frankly, because the fire trucks just aren't accessing that area. So we are proposing to use this area outside the fire lane as what would be the ride share drop-off, loading, unloading spaces. Just, again, providing that opportunity for an Uber or Lyft to pick someone up or drop someone off in that area. We could sign and those appropriately. We don't intend those to be parking spaces per se, but they would provide that opportunity. It can be dedicated and signed in a way that the board felt appropriate.
Do you know about the size of that area you're talking about? How many?
It's probably around 60 feet.
So you can fit 3 cars there.
Well, I would say 2 comfortably. 3, depending on how cozy they get to each other in terms of their parking. One of the other comments which we have taken to heart is the question about bike racks, and we've certainly agree with the board's recommendation about adding bike racks. There's already bike racks in the residential side, so there's really nothing more to add there, but on this commercial side, what we are proposing would 4 bike racks, generally in the locations of at least 1 near the tunnel, 1 to 2 at the tunnel, perhaps 1 at the other side of the eastern side of the grocery store near the retail, and then we're thinking 2 in the public plaza space near Bloomfield and Lackawanna. So again, it's not reflected on this plan, but would be as part of a revised plan submission to have at least 4 bike rack locations as we just described.
I have a question about that. Where do you anticipate employee? Is there a separate employee entrance? Because that's the most I can see a need for some of the employees perhaps to come here by bike. Where would they enter the building, and how could a bike rack relate to that?
I think at this point we're not quite sure. Again, that's could be some tenant-specific requirements about how they may want to segregate employee entrances. I think your point's well taken, though, to the extent that that can be identified. We can incorporate that opportunity for the employees to do it. Because certainly, I agree with you. There's some opportunity there, particularly obviously if they're local, to be able to do that. They're not the ones carrying groceries home necessarily.
Right.
In addition to employee parking at some point, I guess we'll talk about that?
Not tonight, but yes, that's part of a future testimony by a traffic engineer.
Okay, great.
I know there was some discussion, some back and forth relative to, we had identified on our site plan an area of what I would call an opportunity for seating on the eastern side of this retail space. That still exists. We just wanted to clarify, and again, with the board's response, that we understand that there's concern about potential incompatibility of the programming of that space. The type of seating that might be appropriate for one tenant may not be for another. Again, without any recognition of who those tenants are, it's our belief, again, we want to create the opportunity for that, but the formal programming of that really will have to wait until we can understand what that tenant mix is, and it may be even specific to each individual retail space, again, whether it's appropriate at all, and to how that can be designed and programmed accordingly.
Is that something that you anticipate then is going to change as tenants might come and go?
I think that possibility exists, yes.
Realistically speaking, when you're talking about these areas, do you think that that's something that is actually going to happen, or whatever gets in there first is probably what's going to be there for the duration?
For the duration of?
The existence of the building and the area.
I mean, frankly, Mr. Chairman, I mean, if someone could sign a 5-year lease or a 20-year lease, you know, I mean, that will dictate how long they may be there and the success of their business.
Well, I think what dictates how long they're going to be there is how successful the business is. You know,
And
so, you know, and as we've seen in town, things come and things go. And just trying to get an idea if you are trying to plan something that's going to enhance the exterior area of the development, or that's going to be solely focused on a tenant.
Well, I think it's the former, but I will say that there was some valid questions about what if, the what if scenario of what if what we program is incompatible with a particular tenant. Frankly, again, that's the whole context of bringing it up again today, is that it will need to evolve to a certain degree. So we want to create the opportunity for that. We do view it as a benefit in general for the project as a whole to have that opportunity.
Let me suggest that maybe a good approach would be to create a baseline plan. If that plan needs to be adjusted because of a tenant coming in, that's probably something that we can account for with the board committee and have a contingency to allow for that. But we can't approve a totally abstract concept. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
So we need a baseline to review, and on the off chance that by the time it comes time for us to vote that you don't have a tenant for that space, it would be a good idea to have a basic layout available for us to review, something that could stay there for the duration if, in fact, you know, tenant that you ultimately put there has no use for outside space. You know?
I agree. I think that's a fair proposal. Thank you.
Could you say something about Grove Street and the traffic flow on Grove?
Our traffic engineer will be presenting further specific testimony on that in a little bit.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Really, I think the last item had to do with the request about trying to find additional places for the train shed locations, the ones that had not been otherwise put to good use. I think it was put on the record by Mr. Stevie that we were reusing some 81 out of 98 existing ones. We have looked at places to be able to do it, and we've gotten pretty universal response back through the marketing folks and the brokers about there is fairly staunch opposition from the potential grocery store tenants to having these stanchions within the parking field. They view them, frankly, as potential liability, somewhat of a nuisance, and even one said potentially uninsurable. So at this point, we have not incorporated them further into the plan. And that's actually all I have.
There was one more question, I think, about the owner of the Pig and Prince was here, and wondering if you were going to speak with him about his trash removal and operation of his business while all of this is going on. Did you have a conversation with him?
I could speak to that. We did meet with Mike Carino and his attorney. We actually set that meeting up. Todd and I had set it up, and obviously had to be rescheduled. And Mike was very supportive. He had gotten to know Todd pretty well. I met with Mike and his attorney, Bennett Wilson, and we believe that we can address all of his issues. We're going through them right now. We'll be able to report back at the next meeting.
Is that all you have for us?
That's actually all we have for Mr. Webb, but obviously open to questions.
Yeah. Does the board have any further questions of Mr. Webb about what he's testified to this evening? Does the public have any questions based on the testimony given this evening? Oh. Mr. Scott?
Good evening, William Scott. I just had some questions about, I believe there was supposed to be a requirement for a display of the affordable housing units in the various floor plans for each of the floors.
That
And
was
they were
submitted.
updated, but I do
That
have.
was submitted.
Okay.
I believe somebody else will testify to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think this witness testified about that, Mr. Scott.
Well, they were going over some of the changes from a building standpoint. So.
Well, for the layout, yeah, but,
I think that'll be the architect.
Yeah.
So those changes were shown on the architect's plans.
Okay, but will that be covered tonight?
Yeah, we can cover that tonight. Okay. Thank you.
okay.
Kathleen Bennett, chairperson of the HPC. I just heard testimony that the majority of the steel structural supports will not be able to be used.
No, that wasn't, that was the other way around.
81 out of 98 will be used.
Oh, but you don't know where?
And we know exactly where.
Okay.
What had come up with the last meeting was that since there was approximately 17 or 18 other ones that were available, if somehow they could be incorporated into the site or someplace to be reused. And that was the inquiry that was made at the last hearing, and the response was, we had talked about maybe they could be put in the parking lot to echo
exactly
and the response that we got was that their tenants don't, or the feedback they've gotten from potential tenants was that it wouldn't work.
So I would assume, or I would ask, are you seeking a demolition permit for the destruction of the train sheds and the structural supports?
Are you getting at, is there something that could be done with the other 18 to preserve them?
Well, no, if the according to, and we heard this in front of the HPC, and unfortunately, everything that we looked at, I don't think we were really aware of the whole idea of demolition and demolition of historic structure. I think when we saw this project as it's presented now, we were so glad that the density and the massing had been reduced that we didn't really pay attention to what it says in our ordinance, which is 347-137D, criteria, review criteria for demolition. So with regard to applications to demolish a landmark or any building, structure, object, or site located within a landmark district, the following matters shall be considered. And then there's 10 considerations. And the first one, I would just read, it's the historical, architectural, cultural, and aesthetic significance. So I'm wondering whether, I think what's being lost in this is that this is a very significant site. It's locally designated, it's state designated, and it's nationally designated. And I think that we have no record on record, and I would request that it comes to the HPC that we can actually have something written with reviewed destruction for demolition. So demolition you would seek a demolition permit, correct?
I would like to respond to that, Kathleen. You know, we came before the HPC and made the exact same presentation of the same 81 and showed them all being used, and you and the others were extremely concerned about that, and I know that because we actually came back twice to the HPC and added a substantial additional number of them between the first meeting and the second meeting. And everything that ordinance says about weighing the balance of the historic nature of the items versus development was incorporated. And frankly, we concluded that by using over 80% of them, we're able to still build a project that is marketable and can be tenanted, but that any more of them, there's just no other place to use them. And I think, just to point out for the planning board's benefit and the public's benefit, as well as answering your question, it's not even just a numbers game, right? If we were using them all and just sticking them in a parking lot somewhere in the back where no one ever went, it wouldn't be very meaningful.
Well, that was our argument.
Right, but as I think we explained that night, because I think in the second HPC meeting, I distinctly remember, it wasn't you, but one of the other members didn't understand, the entire facade of the food store has these stanchions all the way, I use that word, I don't even know what they're called, but all the way across the entire front, all the way across the other side, the bus stop, all along the side building, and they're very prominent. So we're not saying that we are giving this just lip service. We're saying that we recognize that it's serious, but what we can't do is literally leave the sheds that were there for protecting people standing there during the rain in place everywhere they are in the parking lot. That's really all we changed.
So is there a possibility that this can, and thank you for that explanation, this be sent back to the HPC for our written documentation as to the aesthetic and value, the historic significance of it?
Can I make a suggestion? Before we say whether one way or another, can you and the developer, and by you I mean that the members of the HPC and the developer have a conversation? Because it sounds like there was maybe some discussion, there was some misunderstanding. If you guys could have a more in-depth conversation about what's in the plans and what's going on, maybe that's not necessary. Maybe the matter's already has been resolved and there's just a misunderstanding about the way that it is. Instead of us making a formal pronouncement and trying to whether or not we can do it or not, if you'd have that conversation first and see if you can work it out, and then if you can't work it out, then we can decide one way or the other. How about that?
And Chairman, I'm aware that the HPC does have a design review subcommittee. I suppose there might be other subcommittees that could be formed. We'd be happy to meet with one of those subcommittees in advance of the next planning board meeting to try and see if we can work it out.
In the interest of efficiency and trying to keep things moving along.
Okay, but there is definitely in our ordinances demolition.
Right.
Demolition of historic structures, and the HPC should be. And I have to say that we do not have, can I just finish? We do not have an HPC consultant. So we relied on 2 reports from the architectural consultant of the planning board. Demolition was never included in those 2 reports. I think it was something that we really did not consider when we were hearing this.
I don't mean to be argumentative in any way, but because we are making a record here, that's absolutely not what happened. We discussed the demolition. I discussed it. Our architect discussed it. We said that we were demolishing the portions that we were. The HPC had issues with it. We made changes and came back and left substantial additional stanchions, plus agreed to reutilize them in other areas. So I think I just want to get the record straight, but we agree, as our counsel said, that we'd be glad to sit down and show you, because maybe it wasn't clear where they all are.
And and let me just add to that. If for some reason you can't work it out, the ordinance requires certain things, so we'll make sure that the requirements of the ordinance are met. But instead of making some formal pronouncements right now saying that this will happen and that will happen, if you guys could have a conversation and go back over this, because it sounds like there's been some gap in communication.
I don't know if it's a gap in communication.
Maybe that can be resolved.
The complexity and the size, scope of the project lends itself to these kinds of views and orientations that you don't always focus on the full parameters of every aspect before them. So it's not as the chair of the HPC said, that their focus at that point may have been on the density and size of the project and not this particular detail. It's not uncommon, given the scope, to miss these kinds of details. So I think the chair's suggestion is a good one, to try and do this in the subcommittee, and then cognizant of the ordinance. If that doesn't work, then we can revisit.
We agree.
Okay.
All right.
So how do we set that up? Do I set that up through the planning office, or? Okay. Okay.
Why don't you talk directly with them? If you have issues getting it, to your satisfaction, let us know. But if you guys could get together and do this at a mutually agreeable time, and that way, we could hopefully get it done in a more efficient manner, and more expeditious manner, to keep things moving along.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Public, yes. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Mr. Rabaki, and just... It seems like you're a member.
Just quickly, it has more to do with this back and forth conversation.
Your full name on the...
I'm sorry.
I know everybody knows you except for me.
Frank Rabaki, 398 Upper Mountain Avenue. Is that on?
Spell your last name.
Rubacky.
Thank you.
Just as far as the conversation with the HPC subcommittee, I just want to caution the HPC and all parties involved that they have rules as far as quorum, so they can't have any more people than what their committee allows. Okay.
Evening, Carrie Heller, 1 Greenwood, next door. As
Your last name, sir?
Heller.
Thank you so much.
Mixed use, office, retail, service next door. As promised, I did meet with Brian, and several of the changes that we talked about have been reflected in the changes that are not yet on the plan, but that were testified. I do have some other questions and concerns, and Mr. Whitten, I've been in front of your board several times over the years, always for existing buildings, and I think existing buildings need to be reused. Conditions do change. I'm the owner of the Panera property. Large trailer trucks, we've stopped allowing them into the property. It's become unsafe. There are conditions some towns
At this point,
restrict.
at this point, it's just
And I'm leading
questions.
to, obviously, a question.
Okay, but we're
Yes.
not doing comments right now.
Absolutely, but leading into the question. If I may ask the engineer, are we going to share the microphone? The loading area, as it currently sits now, is how many square feet exclusive of the easement?
Frankly, I don't know the answers now.
Is there a typical size for a loading area, staging, circulation, smaller trucks for a supermarket of about 44,000 square feet?
Typical? I mean, I don't know that there's one typical. Again, this is an urbanized site. This isn't a brand-new greenfield site where we're starting from scratch. We're working with an existing infrastructure.
Well, you're working with it. It's an existing infrastructure that's being reduced by some amount of square footage, and a loading bay or more being reduced or eliminated?
There is one loading bay that exists today that is being eliminated. That's actually along Glen Ridge Avenue. As I'd mentioned before, the current configuration is there's 2 loading docks here today that are oriented essentially east-west. There's another loading area with a little bump out of the building that is going to be demolished. So that entire, what you would call, I guess, the 3rd loading area is being eliminated. The programming of this whole loading configuration area, the components of it, has been evaluated with potential tenants. So the programming of this loading area, to answer your question more completely, we feel is appropriate based on what the tenants have informed to us, meets their service needs, and in terms of the area there for the truck turning movements, perfectly adequate for the 53-foot trailers that will serve the site.
The area that's been, could you point the area for snow, which now is a loading dock and was utilized by Pathmark and its successor as a loading dock, is now becoming snow and landscaping, which I support. But
right.
For the smaller trucks, I'm going to assume for the moment that the supermarkets, and you guys all know what you're doing for supermarket need for the large trailers, but is it not possible for the smaller beer trucks, soda trucks, Frito-Lay trucks, and the scores and scores of those trucks that I've seen we're only there 15 years, that perhaps that area could be, I love landscaping, could be pushed back a little bit more, perhaps allow for staging, stacking, short-term parking, as you're providing for, as you said, in front of the compactors, which are now being installed in the loading parking area, taking up more of the space, and you're taking up more of the space by eliminating the other loading dock. Can we create some space there?
Theoretically, we could, if it was at the board's discretion to do that. Again, from our perspective, the tenants have not demanded that kind of additional space for the additional smaller trucks, as you suggest.
I would just ask the board to consider that as it makes its decision. There is the ample opportunity. Landscaping is terrific. I'm looking to keep vehicles off our property and off the street.
Could you point out with your light exactly what area you're talking about?
Yes, it's in this sort of wedge-shaped piece between the buildings. So this is the limit of the existing building today. There is a pavement and loading area in there today. There's a little bump out of the building that's going to be demolished. That's essentially a sort of an offshoot loading dock from the back of the grocery store. So that area, as we've currently programmed it, is all green space. It's all landscaping. The portion that, if we were to go forward with the plan as we've shown here, that's new is this green space right here with grass pavers. The rest of this is already in the plan as previously submitted as green space to be landscaped.
So from what I'm understanding, you find it possible without disrupting your plan in order to accommodate that extra loading dock? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're saying we don't think we need to. From
But it's possible is what I'm saying.
It's theoretically possible if we were to eliminate green space to do that, yes.
Oh, okay.
And your building is the one right to the left, is it, with the
We share an
parking deck?
easement. The river comes underneath. We share the driveway coming in. We're looking forward to this project, but yes, our concern would be trucks and circulation and comings and goings, in and out of the property, and having some history of seeing how many other vehicles, including people going to the post office, and I'd be willing to bet most everybody in this room is parked in that parking lot at some time or another. Lack of striping, it's hard, it's urban, it is, but to take away more space is just the concern. I want this to work as much as everybody does.
Okay.
And Mr. Webb, just to clarify, notwithstanding the testimony you just gave, which is that it's certainly possible to have the third loading area there, what was the reason for, or part of the reason for eliminating that loading area as it relates to Glenridge Avenue?
Well, really, it's the programming of the space, the way the loading docks are going to be reconfigured in the interior, and the way the interior of the grocery store is going to function. It was ancillary, unnecessary, and in fact, some ways incompatible with the reconfiguration of the docks according to the new building.
And did it have anything to do with the sort of how it would look or the attractiveness from Glenridge?
Well, certainly, we feel that the alternative plan that we presented is certainly more beneficial to the community. I mean, we've had a lot of discussions both the Historical Preservation Commission, and in fact, even in this board, about that corner and trying to beautify that corner.
If I may, nobody's suggesting it be a loading dock or be retained as the smaller trucks that are going to come in, and if I may, to the compactors here, the trailer trucks here, this circulation area is where they're all going to circulate. By just having this as, it wouldn't be one, it'd be two, maybe three of these smaller vans, trucks. There are so many specialty vehicles now that come in very small sizes. I just think the small sacrifice in a little bit more green area, whether it can be made up elsewhere, or I'm just looking to create, I just wanted to plant the seed and ask the question. I didn't want to sell or testify, but just make aware.
All right, and then if I can make a suggestion then, too, since we are going to get further drawings on this area, and you've indicated that there's area in front of the trash compactors where you thought staging would take place, if you could make sure that you know, on the drawings, the circulation drawings, that you indicate exactly where those staging areas are going to be, how big they are, how many trucks they could, accommodate if you're anticipating one or two at a time, so that we can weigh everything together to see how to operate. Because I'm not really sure. I have a vague idea based on the drawing about what you're talking about, but how it's going to operate in the real world, I'm not quite so sure. And so it would be helpful and trying to be considerate of the adjoining property owners' request, if we could see that.
Certainly.
I would just like to add, because I was at the same meeting, so you're sort of asking both of us. I could just show one point. So right over here, this area here, and I appreciate what you're saying, Carrie. And again, we're relying a lot on the decades of experience that Hampshire has with supermarket-based shopping centers. If any of the operators we've been talking to needed this, trust me, we would be arguing back to both the planning board and the HPC that we really couldn't make this entire area nicer and greener. We added this space, as we discussed, Carrie, when we met, because this area, by putting grass pavers, Carrie made an excellent point. He's a very good operator. We had no place to put the snow. And he said that to us. We hadn't thought about it. So this gives us an area where we can pile the snow, but we don't damage the landscaping because of the grass pavers. As far as your question, Mr. Chairman, over here, by putting the trucks this way, they used to go this way. We now have opened up, in addition to the compactors, but we'll show you clearly. And the third thing is, these used to park out here because Pathmark didn't have the equipment that we'll be putting inside for cooling. So they literally kept them running and kept diesels and so forth, which was very obnoxious to the neighborhood. So all of this, these trucks will not stay here permanently. So for those few reasons, we think it works better, but we'll show that on the updated.
Yeah, I'm really curious as to how many trucks you can stack in there, the smaller trucks, because, you know, from just casual experience with going back and forth past it sometimes, you know, sometimes there's more than 2 small trucks offloading at the same time. It seems like there is room there for more than 2 trucks, but I would like to see how you plan it and configure it to have trucks there and also to allow the tractor-trailer base to operate.
Understood.
Yeah, I have just a related question as well. It seems like more and more supermarkets are having a delivery service. So like a Fresh Direct or whatever, delivery trucks come. Is it anticipated that they would use that loading dock as well?
It's possible. Those, of course, would be smaller vehicles. It wouldn't be the tractor-trailers.
Well, sometimes they're big panel trucks as well, as vans or whatever.
Right, the box trucks or things
Yeah.
like that. And that's what we would anticipate modeling in terms of, according to the chairman's request, is trucks of that size.
Okay.
Could have followed that up with, and I'm sure Brian, whether Hampshire or whether yourself, how many, this was approved in 1982, 83. Size of trucks, frequency, the sales of supermarkets, tremendous. Can bring people to the town, we're going to manage traffic and the like. How many trailer trucks will come per day in this is by today's standards an undersized supermarket at 44,000 feet. Nevertheless, it could be as busy as a 70,000 foot. The busier it is, I assume the more trucks. Of the 53-foot variety, 48-foot variety, how many trucks per day might there be?
It's highly tenant dependent. I mean, you know, every tenant's going to operate differently.
But do your tenants, the tenants that you've been talking to and getting other advice about the site from, can they give you an estimate of what they would anticipate the traffic would be for a successful store?
I mean, we can try to formulate that, but again, we haven't gotten so specific to say how many trucks, when are they coming.
Well,
It's just not
gotcha.
at that point.
The approximation is a fair question. I think we
Yeah,
can
I
try
mean,
and come back with
they-
that. Yeah.
Isn't some of this answered a traffic expert also?
Yeah, it may be, that, but I don't want to put him on the spot that he knows the answer. So,
To their credit, I manage a property down in Newark. Flying Foods delivers all the food to the airport, and I manage this park. And it was a mess for the longest time. And the large trucks, the Ciscos and the likes, it just came recklessly. And a system was put in place. But to know how many, how often, how long they stay is something, and I know we've spoken about this, and I have Brian's assurances, but not knowing who the tenant is. And I've been in front of this board and for my CVS and the like, and I haven't always gotten an approval until certain tenants are known for larger property. We moved the loading dock on that property years ago. I would just ask that we have a sense. If not, I don't know that it's possible. I don't know enough about the supermarkets. Normally, you don't want loading at night. In this particular case, if the supermarkets are willing to do it, would the applicant or would the board, or is there some knowledge of whether truck loading can occur after 6 o'clock at night rather than during the day? I don't know how many trucks are coming.
Well, let's see what we can find out.
Understood. the width of the driveways are changing. There's now 2 driveways, and there's a sidewalk in between. You sort of get to rest in between the 2 driveways. Right now, it's not a problem because there's no activity, very little activity into my property. How wide is the apron both at the sidewalk and underneath the curb, as it's to be newly constructed?
Shown an 8-foot wide apron.
No, how long?
Oh, 78 feet.
And that's at the sidewalk, or is that in the
At the
street?
sidewalk.
What is it at the street?
It's the same. Well, I mean, it's...
Well, no, it's not.
It's marginally larger.
No, it's more than marginally, but
It might be 10 feet wider on each side.
98 feet? I would just ask that, I don't know, and I know you're asking for the took that off my question list of the articulation, to just be able to show, does it need to be that wide when they show the turning radiuses for the trucks backing in? Just be as wide as it needs to be.
Well, whatever,
children, baby carriages, or all.
whatever drawing that they're going to show, they're going to have to show it works for the truck. So I would assume that would be part and
I
parcel.
don't want it to be wider, I want it to be as little as it needs to be.
And that's what really the impetus of what we've shown here is the extension of those 2 islands at the ends is trying to do exactly what you're suggesting, to make that opening as narrow as possible while still accommodating those trucks. But as you suggested, the formal plan showing those turning movements is forthcoming.
Is there any, I know mid-block cross, I think it was talked about on Grove Street, and I don't know, again, with the post office, with what we have, is there any rational thought? Let me take away the word rational. Is there any practical, I'm sorry, practical thought to putting in, I mean, for the meters, the crossing, the trucks are going to be doing what the trucks are going to be doing. I recently was in Europe. I've even seen prior to the aprons all throughout Paris, really ugly, one of the ugliest things in Paris, but as you came to the aprons or driveways, they had 2 little bollards, just so people would know, or again, just tying that into on the, is it the east side as you're coming out to the right-hand side? I don't know if you could line up the post office door. I just wonder if there's any sense in having a crosswalk, and I would just ask if that could be considered.
From a design perspective, we would never recommend a mid-block crosswalk, especially when we have just a little bit to the east, a signalized intersection, so you'd have a formal crosswalk at a signalized intersection. So I don't think we'd ever recommend it. We have it in both directions. So we would not try to encourage that maneuver. In fact, we're trying to do the opposite, get them down to Glen Ridge, down Glen Ridge to Grove, and cross at the existing crosswalk at the signalized intersection.
We do deference in South Orange Avenue, Milburn Avenue. We've put in mid-block crosswalks and may differ than this situation. I'll leave that to the traffic people in the
You gotta stay on questions. We're gonna eventually have the traffic person. And in my experience, I've heard a lot of these cases, and it's normally discouraged, but a mid-crosswalk, most police departments are opposed to it.
I'll beg to differ, but okay.
Sure.
I'm seeing it
Anytime
in
you
practice
wanna debate it.
all around the county. I'm seeing it. If I may, the easement that we share, is there any activity on the easement other than both using it? Is there any maneuvering that you see as part of truck traffic in and out?
No, I think actually this plan improves that greatly by more or less eliminating that activity that is inherent in utilizing the docks where they're currently configured.
All right. In the event, last question, and I'll leave everyone be. In the event, and it's a tight, whether call it suburban, urban area, where might a large tractor trailer that comes to the site and there is no room to come in, where might that be sent, staged? I know there should be, in theory, communication with a loading dock manager. I'm just a little bit familiar with the area and just curious where that truck might go if it's coming from Grove Street, as you're indicating. Somebody asked the question, I'm sorry, about not making the left-hand turn out. If that truck is coming from Grove Street and it can't pull into the parking lot, we have the situation now in Milburn, no left-hand turns, this way, that. Trucks are getting caught into the railroad tracks. No one anticipated that there was no way out, and the trucks are backing up down from the railroad track. My concern is that something comes in from Grove Street or from Glenridge Avenue. What happens to that last truck that doesn't fit into the parking lot?
I think in our meeting, I'll have to be the other half of this one to answer. As we said in our meeting, there is no place here The food stores today all use delivery communication systems. They don't want the trucks there, and as I said to you, it's a hassle for their managers to deal with it, and it's an annoyance, and it's also an imposition on the neighborhood. So they will be instructing those trucks not to come where they stay. They could be in Clifton, they can be, I don't know where they're going to be. I know they're not going to be by the Panera. But wherever they go, they can't come here until they're welcome. And that's really what the management is all about.
And then if they do come, they're going to be sent away.
They're going to be sent away. They're not going to be allowed to stay there.
Mr. How? That's my question, is how are they going to be sent away?
I think
Once
the
they're in that
management of
street, they're in.
The management of the food store needs to do their job, and that is their
You
job.
mean once they're in, they are not supposed to be going in a certain direction on the street?
They're on Glen Ridge Avenue. They can't turn into the site. How do they get out?
I think they're going to wind up going up to Lackawanna Plaza and making a turn there.
I'm not
Don't
sure
you?
that can be. I'm not sure that can be done. But yes, that would be my concern.
Well, if you go up to the past the little parklet, that's a pretty wide intersection there because it's at an angle. So they should be able to make the loop around onto Lackawanna Plaza back out to Bloomfield Avenue.
Okay. I leave that for I planted whatever seeds. I thank you for considering.
Can I have a clarification? I think you said that there's no trucks that would be going down that easement, but there's a loading dock at the end of the easement, right?
Well, no, what we said was there will be, yes, there is a loading dock at the end. There
Yeah,
will be
so-
trucks
so
that
tr-
utilize the
Yeah.
easement under the current rights. It's none that will be doing so that impedes use of Mr. Heller's
Okay.
facility.
So is that smaller area you're just speaking about with the easement, is that where the restaurant deliveries will go?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions from the public? Okay, looks like we're good with this witness. Counselor?
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, with the board's permission, I'd ask Stephen Ladaki to come up from Langen Engineering and give us some testimony on landscape architecture. First, we'll seek to have him qualified as an expert.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Say your full name for the record, spell your last name.
Stephen Ladati, last name spelled Laudati.
Does he appear regularly here? Would you give us 3 boards you've appeared before recently?
Sure. Jersey City, Washington Township, and I'm trying to think of the last board.
They're going to be hurt when they find out.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
You're licensed as a landscape
Yeah,
architect
I'm
in the
a
state of New
licensed
Jersey?
landscape architect in the state of New Jersey since 2006. Been working at Langen for 18 years. Design.
Stop, time out. Mr. Chairman, we accept his credentials?
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll accept you.
Who was trying to shortcut? Your witness, please proceed.
Okay, so, Mr. Ladati, actually, can we refer you to your landscape plan?
And this is what was previously submitted, there's no changes?
That's,
What exhibit number, sir?
What exhibit, yeah?
so this will be exhibit number A22, and, I'm sorry, that's
This is the
A21?
one that was previously submitted.
Previously submitted. Oh, so this is, so what was previously submitted was marked as A21?
No, this is
Oh,
not.
A20, actually.
This is a colorized version of, is this colorized of LP 101?
Yeah, I think this was in the previous PowerPoint presentation, is
Gotcha.
that it?
Yeah, so that's
A20?
the previous Langen presentation was A20.
Yeah.
Are we looking at this, or are we looking at this?
So no, so what you're looking at is a colorized version of
The
LP
landscape planting plan.
LP 101.
Without the plant labels.
And it was marked at the last hearing, which is what's causing the
It
confusion.
was presented as part of the PowerPoint presentation.
All right, so Mr. Landotti, so with respect to this plan, was this plan prepared by, were you involved in the preparation of this plan?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And with respect to the overall plan, can you give the board the benefit of some understanding of the overall square footage of hardscape and landscaping?
Sure. So in terms of the public open space, we have roughly 6,000 square feet of a renovated plaza at the intersection of Lackawanna and Bloomfield Ave. And in terms of the square foot of landscape, proposed landscaping, we have about an acre. That includes roughly 11,000 on the western parcel and 31,000 on the eastern parcel.
And how does that translate in terms of trees and shrubs on the site?
So we have 62 proposed trees total. That includes on the sites and on the streetscape, 48 on the site. Roughly 2,100 shrubs, 300 grasses, and 1,200 perennials.
So now, with respect to the western portion of the site, can you give the board an overview of the landscaping and proposed streetscape along?
Sure. So, as many of you may know, the parking lot that's there now, most of the trees are dead or in poor condition. That goes for the streetscape along Grove and Bloomfield Ave. And in the plaza itself at the corner of Lackawanna and Bloomfield, the trees are dead or in poor condition. There's 2 dead trees, and we met with the township arborist there. We're basically proposing a substantial amount of landscape to green the area. This landscape will include a number of trees, as pointed out earlier, ground cover, shrubs, perennials. The goal here is to provide seasonal interest throughout the year, extended blooming times with the perennials, and really have a landscape that complements the historic architecture and the proposed architecture.
Now, is it fair to say, with respect to the western portion of the site, that the proposed landscaping meets the ordinance requirements?
Yes, it is.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question, I guess, with the eastern portion of the site. Can you give the board a little bit of the benefit of what's being proposed?
Sure. So on the eastern site, again, we wanted to have a unified landscape design. So many of the plant species, plant types that are on the western side, we're carrying that onto the eastern side. So that includes street trees along the public right-of-way, all new street trees. We have foundation planting along the proposed building. That includes a mix of perennials and shrubs, ornamental grasses and ground cover. You'll also find that on the north along Glenridge Avenue, that same planting palette, and to the south on the southern part of the building.
And with respect to the eastern portion of the site, fair to say that the proposed landscaping meets the ordinance requirements?
Yes, it does.
Sure. Now, circling back actually for just a moment to the western site, and maybe with the eastern side as well, can you orientate the board to the presence and number of trees that are proposed in the parking area?
Sure. So in the parking area itself, there's a total of 48 trees between the two sites, excluding the streetscape. Within the parking lot here, we're proposing, count this number right here, I believe 18 trees in the parking lot. And I'd like to point out to the board that these trees, we're not just digging a hole and planting the tree. The applicant's going above and beyond by providing structural soil below the paving to really make these trees sustainable and not repeat what we have going on there now and the trees dying. That's for these trees in the main parking field.
And can you give the board the benefit of understanding in terms of trees that are being removed or replaced?
Sure. So there's a total of 30 trees being removed on site, and as I mentioned earlier, there's 48 trees being proposed.
And that's in compliance with the township's ordinance requirements on tree removal?
Yes, it is.
So now, moving forward, would refer or ask the board to refer to the lighting plan that was previously submitted, LL 101. And there's an exhibit on the screen. Is that the same exhibit that was submitted with the board's package?
Yes, it is. It's drawing LL 101.
So could you please describe for the board the existing lighting and any proposed changes with regard to fixtures and light levels for the parking areas, sidewalks, and residential amenity deck on the east parcel?
Sure. So the streetscapes are typical public service Cobra headlights, high-pressure sodium. Within the parking lots, they're the old shoebox style, I call them, the square heads. They're very poor condition. So that's on both lots, that fixture style. And as far as the proposed lights go, again, similar to the landscape, we're looking to really unify the site, the streetscape together. So along Grove, Bloomfield Ave, we're proposing the standard from PSE&G to match the existing lights that are out there. And that same light fixture will also be used on the site. So that basically it's a uniform light fixture throughout. The lamp type is a LED using the latest technology that's out there. The color temperature is a 3000, matching the high pressure sodium, the standard that the city has. And that's basically it for lighting.
Sure. And can you describe the location of the decorative street lighting with respect to the frontages along Lackawanna Plaza and Glenridge, west of Grove?
Sure. So the lighting basically is type E and F fixtures going down Grove Street, and then Bloomfield Ave is the same fixture, and then in the plaza at the corner of Lackawanna and Bloomfield Ave, basically there's two existing lights off-site that will be maintained, so there'll be adequate lighting in that plaza area. And then the rest will be contributed with the decorative lighting.
What's the intensity in the plaza? How many foot candles?
The intensity in the plaza is the point by point that's shown there is not including the lighting from the street. So it's a little lower than just 2-foot candles, but with that lighting on the street, it would be higher and meet the town.
So would it be fair to say that with modeling, we believe we'll meet the required foot candles, but to the extent we don't meet it, we would accept as a condition of approval that we'll comply?
Correct.
I think you should show a plan that shows that you comply. Revise it to show that you comply.
We'd have to reach out to Public Service to see if we can obtain those photometric files and run them in our calculations.
Get them all.
And if you don't mind, I ask this question. How come there's no pedestrian, you don't extend those street lights along Lackawanna Plaza? The decorative ones.
The decorative street lights in there? Basically, we have, because of the size of the plaza, if you start adding more poles in close proximity, the lighting levels may exceed that 2-foot candle requirement. I know we're a little high just at the entrance area here, but that's basically one of the reasons. You're talking this area right here, right?
I'm talking along the street, Lackawanna Plaza.
Oh, along the street, Lackawanna. I believe that's outside of our site, so we weren't along Lackawanna going north.
So would it be possible to add maybe 4 additional lights along the area that Janice is referring to that would cover the area before we get to the what might
first
starting to get into the loading?
So this strip here from the first driveway entrance north of the intersection of Bloomfield Ave, this strip in here?
I mean, I think you should include it all, along the little frontage area there, because you have your office building.
You're saying through to the corner?
Mm-hmm.
We can do that.
I don't know if you went through my report. I mean, I also suggested you do it along Glenridge Avenue, too. We, the township, did it along Glenridge Avenue to Grove Street, but it should be continued along the portion of Glenridge Avenue on the west of Grove Street.
This section
West.
area?
We've already put those in. They're not your plan. I don't know if you went through my report, but your plan didn't show our streetlights that are our pedestrian streetlights that are on Glenridge Avenue, east of Grove Street. And what I'm asking is the plan should reflect those because they're there. And I think your driveways actually go over some of our existing lights. And those lights should be
No, this
extended.
area right here. Those driveway entrances there.
Okay. Right, but your survey didn't show the location of our existing streetlights.
We can certainly look at that, and
These are all indicated in my report, and I don't know.
So, yeah, so Janice, I apologize. So we may have misread. So on the portion of the site along Glen Ridge, on the eastern portion of the site, that one we may have missed in terms of clarifying the existing lighting that's there. As far as extending the lighting along Lackawanna Plaza, we'll agree to do that, and along Glen Ridge, west of Grove. I think that's where we were thinking of adding a few additional lights, but what we were going to suggest was that perhaps we're not lighting all the way into the loading area.
It's not, the purpose is not to light the loading area, it's the sidewalk, and create the cohesive streetscape improvement. My issue was when I looked at the plans initially, it didn't show our pedestrian streetlights that we had put in on Glen Ridge Avenue approaching Grove Street from the east. I want to make sure that those are preserved, or if you have to relocate them,
Yeah,
because it
you
wasn't
can't
on the
take them.
survey,
Okay.
that they be relocated and that we maintain that same pattern.
We'll clarify that
Okay.
we're not doing that, but.
Okay.
I have a question. There's a little alley, right, that goes from Lackawanna Plaza into the shopping area? How is that lit?
alley.
It's,
right here.
yeah.
Right now, we're not proposing any existing light. There's existing lighting there now, but we'd have to confirm. Is there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. So you're not changing the lighting that's currently there? There will be, okay.
That's
Okay.
Mr. Stevie giving you that information.
Okey-dokey. So are all the wiring, is it all underground?
Yes, it is.
And with respect to the landscaping, is there a sprinkler system, or will that be just no sprinkler system?
I'm not sure if we got to that level of discussion yet on the planting. I do know that the plants that are selected are all drought tolerant,
Oh.
but there's a level of establishment once the contractor
Yeah.
installs them. Usually there's like a 1-year warranty period. It's typical.
Mr. Turner, I had a lot of questions about the lighting. I don't know if.
So, yeah, I was. I could-
Items, because all the way to number 11.
Yes, so right, so I could run through a couple more, and then you can see if I'm missing any.
That's fine.
I believe you already stated this in testimony, but there was a question about replacing high-pressure sodium lamps with LED lighting. We'll agree to do that, correct?
Yes.
And
yeah.
those are the street lamps?
street lights.
Will be LED, good.
Yeah, we have the new cut sheet now, the PSE&G is
PC has
updating.
finally come out with the
Yep,
LED,
it's-
we're happy, okay, good.
Taken a while.
Okay. We talked about the foot candles at the corner of Bloomfield and Lackawanna, I believe. We'll come back on that. We talked about improving, we haven't talked about, but there was a suggestion about improving lighting for the driveway along the front of the proposed supermarket.
And this may be an error in the plan, but the lowest level of illumination was right by the entrance.
Yes, we're aware of that. That's this area right here.
Yeah.
Basically, in our photometric file, we had, I guess there was an older building layer that was blocking the light we had modeled. So
Okay.
we since removed that, and we can update the plans to reflect the lighting levels which comply then.
Okay, that was a concern.
I think we just talked about the pedestrian tunnel a moment ago, and in addition to that, there was a question about
The lighting levels near the train sheds and the
Yeah.
office building, that's not included in there? Since it's part of the site plan, I want to know how that's illuminated.
we'll add that.
And then I was concerned about excessive light over by Montclair Muse.
And I'll ask it as a question, are we able to install shields to eliminate glare, to address the concern about excessive glare in the face of the Montclair Muse?
Most of these Acorn, I call them Acorn decorative fixtures, have a shield option that we can specify. We'll just have to verify with the manufacturer, just since this technology is constantly changing, but I believe the answer is yes.
Because if you look at your lighting plan, the lighting levels are pretty high over there. I want to make sure that you can reduce it, particularly along, people are living right there.
Yeah, usually there's either an internal shield or in part of the Acorn light fixture, they actually paint the glass, depending on the manufacturers, to block the light from going swirling backwards.
You use an LED?
LED, yeah.
So you should be able to control it though, right?
Yes, it depends on what PSE&G has, and also, that's one, they only have certain models that so we'll have to verify
Are
that.
you using PSE&G lights for your parking lot?
It's the same light fixture, so
Okay.
so for the parking lot, it will be a little bit different. We have to see what's available from the manufacturer, but I believe there would be more options.
Because that's what I was
for private
concerned
side.
about, was this is inside the parking lot.
Okay.
I was concerned about that lighting in the parking lot on the east side next to the Muse.
Okay.
I have no further questions, but.
I think we covered
Okay.
everything.
Thank you.
Members of the board have any further questions?
At the DRC meeting, I had, I wasn't here last time, and I didn't see it on the tape. At the DRC meeting, I had reminded you that you were requesting a reduction in the affordable housing percentage, and asked you what public benefit or amenity you were proposing that would warrant that reduction. I didn't hear anything yet on that front. Are you going to present something?
Actually, so we, since the time of the DRC meeting, we've amended the application so that we're no longer seeking a variance.
Okay.
Got a question about your landscaping plan.
Yeah, sure.
The pin oaks, are those susceptible to bacterial leaf scorch?
Yes, all the oaks are right now.
Great.
We
Could you
did-
put something different in there?
We can. We did speak to the town arborist about the plant selection. We can run another species by. We were looking for to maintain that columnar look, but yeah.
Yeah, the document he's released to the township says don't use pin oaks for that reason.
And that.
So I'm
that's-
kind of surprised he said okay
Yeah,
on that.
And it's been affecting a lot of oaks, like the majority of oak species. So then it's like, do we plant no oaks anymore? So, but we can definitely change that plant species.
Okay. Or, if you talk to him again and he's okay with it, I'm going from his list that he provides to us to
Okay.
guide these types
Yeah,
of...
we'll verify with him then.
Okay. And then your Princeton American elm, is that a Dutch elm disease-resistant variety?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Excellent. And are all these plantings native?
Let me just take a double check on the list. I mean, most of them are all native or adaptive. It's a combination of native and adaptive species.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool.
I can't be as technical as my vice chair here.
They're all green, Mr. Chairman.
I kind of have a question like that. Some of these trees have leaves that fall off, some of them don't.
Yeah.
Do you have a ratio between all these plantings about how the deciduous compare to the evergreen?
I don't have the percentages right now written down, but just looking at the plant list, we have approximately 6 evergreen trees. The rest are deciduous, so out of that total number of 62. And
6 out of 62.
And one of the reasons for that is in a more urban setting, having a heavy presence of evergreen, from a safety perspective, we try to avoid that. But there's, the use of the evergreens in a buffer conditioner along Glen Ridge by the loading is appropriate, but in terms of other areas where you're preventing police from viewing in, we try to minimize the use of evergreens. But we can certainly swap out some of the deciduous.
Yeah, I don't understand the safety aspect that you're talking about, unless you're, overplanting or something like that. But certainly, when the deciduous trees are in bloom, you're going to have whatever kind of full blanket of coverage that you would have when you'd have evergreens. I would just wondering if, since we're not living in the tropics and that the trees are bare for a good portion, of the year, if maybe you could up the ratio a little bit to keep some greenery on this site, during the winter months.
Taking that consideration in, and I think fair to say we can take a look at that. But I'm reading in, but when you said a safety concern, were you possibly referring to deciduous trees having leaves that are not growing quite as low as on a evergreen tree?
Yeah, so that's, yes. Where the deciduous trees are all branched up, 6 to 7 foot height, so you can see through. In terms of site triangles, it can have traffic, refer to that, but we have to consider that and views into the site,
Mhm.
for pedestrians from a safety. But also, if you have an island that's 4 foot wide and you plant a Norway spruce there, and that evergreen grows into the parking stalls versus a deciduous tree which has a canopy, so.
Sure, I hear you. The
But-
the
but-
plantings need maintenance.
But
and
all things
they
being
need
equal,
to-
but
you
we
need to
we
have-
can take a look.
Yeah,
we'll
you need
take
to
a
have
look.
active control over them. And I'm not saying that, that I would expect that you'd have a 50-50 ratio, but like I said, 6 out of 60, seems like there's going to be a whole lot of bare trees there, in the fall and the winter.
There's
and-
species that I think would work, of evergreens
Yeah,
that
we
would
can
work in
look at
those
the
areas.
locations and swapping out some of the species.
Yeah, thank you.
Is this anticipated that this will be a 24-hour supermarket?
I think I can probably best answer that, unless you know. I don't know. I think that this industry, and I would probably defer more to the management folks at Hampshire, have been dealing with this industry for a long time, but even they don't really know the future because it's under such change and really couldn't give you a fair answer. Because we don't know.
Other questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public concerning the landscaping testimony you've heard this evening?
And lighting.
And lighting.
Frank Rabacki. 3 questions. One, I was confused about the type of light fixtures in the parking lot. Are they full cutoff? I wasn't clear about that.
They're semi-cutoff.
Okay. The reason you're using semi-cutoff instead of full cutoff?
We're basically using the town standard, so we want to match
Okay.
that.
Okay. Second thing was the TD Bank parking lot. There was some movements of some lighting there. Are you handling that, or is that not your responsibility?
That's our responsibility.
That one's not us.
But it's part of the site plan? I guess my point is,
No,
is
so-
part of the site
so-
plan, not part of the site
So,
plan?
yeah,
I'm
so
confused.
the TD Bank site is listed as part of the site plan because there's a portion of like a corner encroaching into actually that lot, but we're not actually physically doing anything to the TD Bank, but we had to as a matter of legal obligation for notice.
So any changes there don't apply?
That's correct.
Okay. And then full cutoff bank, and what happens when you get old? Can't remember what the third one was, but thank you.
It's happened to me, too.
Other questions from the public? All right, before you go on to your next witness, let's take a break. 5 minutes.
We did some honey harvest. Some of them clues about that.
We're on the record.
All right, to be a good venue. We're back on the record.
Back on the record?
Tom? You want to finish? Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to present for our next witness, we have Carl Pankey from Langen Engineering. I'll seek to qualify Mr. Pankey as an expert in the field of traffic engineering.
Do you swear affirm testimony about the business matters, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your full name for the record and spell your last name.
Sure. For the record, my name is Carl with a K, Penke. Penke. P is in Peter, E-H-N-K-E.
Are you a licensed traffic engineer?
I am a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey as well as several other states. By way of background, I'm Vice President with Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My area of expertise is traffic engineering, which I've been practicing for over 33 years. I regularly appear before planning bodies throughout the state of New Jersey and qualifying as such. I believe this is actually my first time here.
Could you just give us 3 boards you've appeared before recently?
Sure. Morris Township, Morris Plains, and Jersey City.
Mr. Chairman?
We'll accept you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pankey, before you get started, so were you asked to prepare a traffic impact study in connection with the application being presented this evening?
Yes, I was.
And did you, and was that traffic impact statement or study submitted to the board?
Yes, it was.
And that's been pre-marked, I believe, as Exhibit A10. And then since the time of the last time we appeared before the board, did you prepare a letter to NV5 dated March 28th, 2018, providing additional traffic analysis?
Yes, I did.
And that was in response to the NV5 March 1st, 2018 letter, which I believe was previously marked as A14?
Yes, let's say 14.
Yeah, okay.
That would be correct.
And Janice, I would offer to mark as the March 28th submission as A22, I think.
Okay, yes, I have A22.
Okay. And then also just to clarify for the record, and to the extent you might refer to it, did you receive a response to that letter on April 2nd, 2018 from the board's consultant NV5?
Yes, I did.
Sure. And Janice, maybe perhaps we could mark the April 2nd NV5 letter as A23?
Yes, I have that.
Okay. Okay. Now, Mr. Pankey, can you give the board a brief overview of how you prepared to undertake your traffic study and the benefit of your analysis and conclusions?
Certainly. Good evening. My role in the project as a traffic engineer basically is the preparation of the traffic impact study that was submitted with the application. During the course of the application, I also participate with the design team on the layout of the site, particularly its access and circulation elements, in order to transform the results of the analysis and our expertise onto the site plans that have been submitted to the board and has been testified by my partner, Kevin Webb, so far to date. This board, I'm sure, has heard from many traffic engineers. I suspect you understand the process that a traffic engineer goes through in preparing a study. We collect data on the existing roadway system to understand and sample traffic flows. We visit the site. We obtain information on the traffic control devices that are in the study area, the signals, how they're operating, how they're phased, how they're timed, the roadway geometry, the regulatory signage, locations of parking and whatnot. We prepare traffic projections, and with utilizing that data, we then run through an analysis utilizing some rather sophisticated analysis programs, although they seem to be getting more and more sophisticated as we continue to progress in the traffic engineering field. And we use that data and analysis to identify the operational characteristics of the roadway, both without a project and with a project. And the results of all of that is used to design our driveway systems, our geometry, traffic mitigation if it's found that it's needed, and improvements to the roadway system. So on this particular project, as the application has progressed and gotten to this evening, we've had the opportunity to do several things. We've certainly gone out, we've collected data in 2017. I believe it was back in September of 2017. We collected traffic volume data on the roadway system to create a sampling of traffic flow conditions. We've had an opportunity to meet with the county to discuss with them the project and share the proposed development aspects and access and circulation elements of the project to obtain their feedback. We've had the opportunity to review the input of your board's professionals, NV5, review letters of our information and their thoughts and suggestions as to what should be looked at and how we should analyze certain things based upon their input and opinions. And we've been able to document that in a series of documents. So you have the traffic impact study that was submitted with the application. Latest date is February of 2018. And then you have a supplemental analysis that we prepared in March of 2018 based upon feedback we had from your consultant. Both of those documents contain the traffic projections and estimates that we've made for the project. The real difference between them is some minor differences in opinion as to how traffic might actually arrive to the final destination, to the driveways. So as a result of the input of your board's consultant, we prepared a supplemental analysis reflecting how he thought it might work. And as you may have learned through the years, traffic engineering is probably about 80% science and then about 20% art. It's sort of understanding and having a feel how drivers might react, and based upon our experience and observations and so forth. And you know, as professionals, we have little differences in opinions on how people might choose a driveway. So that's really what the difference is between the original traffic study and the supplemental analysis that we've prepared. From an overall perspective on this particular project, it is basically developing a piece of property that's currently developed. The property is heavily developed right now with commercial uses. There's a roughly 48,000 square foot grocer on the site. There's a little more than 42,000 square feet of retail space on the site, and then about 21 to 22,000 square foot of office space on the site. The proposed project, at the end of the day, is basically falling within the same rough densities and traffic generation that the site previously generated. To give you some comparisons, the roughly 48,000 square foot grocer is reducing to about 43,500 square feet. The retail is actually the biggest drop. It's about 42,000 square feet, dropping to about 23,000 to 24,000 square feet, so a net decrease of approximately 22,000 square feet. And the office space is roughly staying the same with a medical use as opposed to a professional use in it. So the net effect is we're roughly trading off about 22,000 square foot of commercial retail space for 154 residential homes. So when you go through, and if you had a chance to read the traffic study, and maybe it's not as clear as I could have made it in the write-up, the net result is during the critical peak hours for analysis, which on a weekday is your typical morning peak hour when people are going to and from work, your AM commuter hour, which is basically occurring someplace between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning. Your weekday PM peak hour, which generally is occurring 5 to 6 o'clock. In any given day, that will shift 15 minutes based on counts. And then your Saturday midday, because of commercial, which is occurring in that midday 12:15 to 1:15 day period. During those particular hours, if you look at the net change that the proposed project has in terms of traffic generation potential versus what's there today, you're going to see that in the morning, you have a little bit of an increase, about 30 to 40 additional trips on the roadway system overall. And that's because retail really isn't active in the morning hours, and residential does have a generation component. So that's why it's a little bit higher in the morning weekday hours. During the evening weekday hours, the overall generation is probably about 50 vehicles less than was generated by the site if it was fully occupied and functional. And on a Saturday, about 70 less vehicles. All in all, I would call it generally a wash. You're really ending up with very similar traffic characteristics from this site as was historically there when the site was fully operational and functional. So I think that's a high-end result or a finding of the study. So then going forward from that standpoint and progressing the project for approval, there are certain things that are occurring and that are proposed in the plan that enhance access and circulation and parking for the site. So as you're aware, and I'm going to use tonight the exhibit, the landscape plan. I think it's a pretty good exhibit, and I think that's A22. A20. So today, as you're aware, Lackawanna Plaza basically has multiple access points. Starting towards the western portion of the project, you have Lackawanna Plaza, and we have a small, approximately 32 space parking lot that has access, 2 access points on Lackawanna Plaza that feed basically the eastern side of the building and the office building. We have today, off of Bloomfield Avenue, a parking lot of a little more than 100 spaces that has a driveway that directly connects to Bloomfield Avenue. It's the only way in and out of that particular driveway. We have the eastern parcel, which is basically a large surface parking lot, which is accessed via a right turn in, right turn out from Bloomfield Avenue, and a full movement driveway from Glenridge Avenue. And then finally, we have the shared access to our neighbor on Lot 1 and our loading area in the back off of Glenridge. So in advancing this project and looking at opportunities to both properly support the project as proposed and our anticipated success of this project, we've looked for opportunities to improve access and circulation elements. So starting on what I'd call the western parcel, probably the major reconfiguration is the expansion of the existing surface lot. That expansion is basically going to result in a little more than 200 spaces on the western lot. And in doing that, we're able to regrade that lot and rework the circulation on that lot and provide enhanced access to that lot. And that's done by a slight modification to the driveway on Bloomfield Avenue, which is right now closer to Grove Street. So we're shifting that to the west a little bit to move it out of the full width of the left turn lane and actually align it with an internal circulation aisle so traffic can move into and out of the site more efficiently. We are adding a driveway on Grove Street, and that driveway is located based upon grading at a point as far from Bloomfield that we can practically construct it. And it also is provided an internal connection that provides access through 2 bays of parking so that we can get good circulation to and from that driveway. The driveway on Bloomfield Avenue to the east parcel will remain a right turn in, right turn out. I forgot to mention, as you're aware, there's an existing slip ramp on Grove Avenue that provides for a right turn flow down into the surface lot. That is actually being disconnected from our project, but maintained for access to the TD Bank. Just to touch on that a little bit, at the last meeting, there was some conversation and some concern with the board with regard to the potential offset nature of left turns into the TD Bank versus left turns into our site driveway. While the magnitude of the traffic going into the TD Bank, making that left, in my opinion, is very minor and really would not present a conflict. Listening to the board and considering that matter, what we would suggest to the board is we will do a minor modification to that driveway and just maintain it as a right turn in movement. So the bank will continue to have the same access it effectively has today. So we'll make that modification subject to the board's agreement on that. On Glenridge Avenue, the driveway is effectively being maintained where it is today. The only addition is a minor, basically porte-cochere drop-off element, which is an inbound movement only. It's really not a heavily used driveway and would be used for drop-off activity to the residential building. Mr. Webb, I think, adequately described the proposed changes to the access to the loading area earlier this evening, so I won't go back into that in detail. And then also from a supporting standpoint, we are proposing to put in a small pull-out feature along the frontage of the residential building on Grove Street, so that there was a safe area for some drop-off pickup activity at that location, Uber rides and whatsoever associated with the residents on that site. With regard to traffic improvements or operations, we've had opportunity to talk to the county. I think one of the substantial benefits that's happening in this area is, as you may be aware, the county has recently been the beneficiary of a federal grant. That grant will allow them to upgrade a whole series of intersections along Bloomfield Avenue with new traffic signalization, ADA pedestrian upgrades, repaving, retiming, and so forth. So that's a fairly substantial win. That money is coming forward, so they're in the process of letting out the design contracts on that, and all of that will create the opportunity for the county to optimize and update the traffic controls along Bloomfield Avenue, and that will be a substantial improvement that's coming down the road. At the same time, we have spoken to the county with regard to Grove Street. Grove Street today is a 48-foot wide cartway. It basically functions as 2 lanes per direction today, but it's not striped in that manner. So in talking with the county, we are proposing to restripe Grove Street, which will marry into the signal plan improvements that they're proposing down at Bloomfield Avenue. That'll allow us to formalize the left turn lane approach to Bloomfield Avenue and a separate through and right, which occurs today, and similarly at Glen Rock, the left turn lane and the through and right that occurs today. And that'll be formalized with striping and signage, proper signage, which will make that a much safer and proper condition and accommodate the flows. That lane configuration also provides the ability to introduce what we call driveway 5 and have that operate at relatively good levels of service. In terms of the impact analysis, as I've indicated, in general, we're not anticipating much of a change in traffic flow conditions overall from this project. What we're finding is that the signalized intersections surrounding our site, Glenridge and Grove, Bloomfield and Grove, Elm, Lackawanna Plaza, and Bloomfield, they're all operating at relatively good levels of service. I think the only notable weaknesses is we're seeing a little bit of heavy traffic on the southbound left from Grove to Bloomfield that could be operating in the little lower levels of service, and at times the westbound approach on Glen Rock. The levels of service at Bloomfield, I fully expect when the county designs that improvement that they'll be able to optimize the timing at that intersection and actually make that little weakness that we were seeing there go away. From an access and circulation standpoint, not unlike any of the driveways of commercial developments along Bloomfield Avenue throughout the town, movement in and out of the driveways operate at lower levels of service, particularly out of the driveways. You have to wait for the gaps. If there's a signal adjacent to the driveway, sometimes when the signals are near the end, your queues will extend back towards the driveways, making a driver have to wait till the gap clears and the signal clears. And that'll continue to occur at these driveways. As I said, we have moved this driveway away to make that situation a little bit better. But overall, by proposing and actually creating 2 points of access to the parking field, we are doing 2 things. One is we're substantially improving accessibility to that parking lot, and 2 is we're creating the opportunity for people to choose the path that they're most comfortable with. And basically that's what's going to happen. Traffic generally seeks its own level, and people will travel the route that they're comfortable with making. So for instance, if you're comfortable making a left turn out onto Grove, which can be done, the sight distances are fine and it can operate safely, to travel back on Glenwood Road to the west, you'll make that movement. But alternatively, you make that same movement by making the right onto Bloomfield and coming up Lackawanna Plaza. So people will have multiple ways to choose and flow onto the adjacent roadway system. It also creates the advantage that during different times of the day, the flow on Bloomfield Avenue on Grove experience different peaks, and peaks by direction, peaks by time of day. And so at various times of the day, if it doesn't make sense to go out onto Grove, you'll be able to go out on Bloomfield and vice versa. So the creation of the 2 access drive actually provided quite an enhancement to the site. From a pedestrian standpoint, there was also improvements being made. Certainly we're maintaining the pedestrian connectivity between the east and west parcel through the pedestrian tunnel. That'll serve both the residents of the facility as well as employees of the commercial and office that will share into the parking lots on the east side. As Mr. Webb has testified to, we are reactivating the staircase, which right now is really of no value, which provides improved pedestrian accessibility down into to the site. We are maintaining or creating or enhancing a connectivity walkway from the Lackawanna Plaza into the shopping center area between the buildings. So there'll be an open air enhanced connection at that location. And then, as I've indicated, the county will be upgrading the signals. So, pedestrian opportunity to approach this site are great. If you're traveling anywhere from the northeast and so forth, you're able to use all the crosswalks at the traffic signal to come down to the site. If you're coming from the south and east on Bloomfield, again, you'll have the opportunity to cross at the traffic signal, which is the appropriate crossing location, and again, that'll be an improved enhancement crossing. If you're coming from the north and west, you can come down Lackawanna Plaza, and you'll be able to connect through into the grocer from that way. And again, if you're coming along Bloomfield, you have direct connectivity through the plaza and crossings at the adjacent traffic signal. So that all works well. The residential is being provided, sidewalks internally, as was described by Mr. Webb at the last meeting, connecting into the parking lots and the residential development as appropriate to accommodate the future residents of that facility. And I think that really summarizes it. I mean, the traffic study really lays out how we made our projections. We're all using the most current data in trip generation estimates in the 10th edition. The background growth and projections we've made for this project include your redevelopment projects in this area, the Seymour Street redevelopment, the Midtown parking deck, the Montclair Gateway Phase 1, and the Eastway Gateway project. All of that's been baked into the traffic study, so we were understanding and incorporating those traffic impacts on the roadway system, and all of that information is within the traffic impact study. And I think that summarizes the studies that have been submitted.
I had a question, and it's regards to the traffic on Grove Street. I'm looking at the fact that we're forcing the traffic that used to take the slip ramp and get into the parking lot and use the underground tunnel to get to the shopping center. And all that traffic will stay on to Grove Street. The Grove Street has a traffic light and Glenridge Avenue has a traffic light. If you are opening up mid-block entrances into the shopping center, it seems to me that there's possibility for quite a bit of congestion. At this point, people who are trying to drive down Grove Street and get to Bloomfield Avenue, that traffic backs up well past that driveway that you're putting in, and I'm trying to figure out, how do people come in down Grove Street and turn left? How do people coming out of that parking lot? It seems to me that there's a potential for quite a bit of traffic tie up there between Grove Street and Glenridge Avenue,
Right,
between
so-
the Bloomfield and Glenridge Avenue on Grove.
And it goes to the two driveway system. So the two driveway system provides the opportunity, if you're coming from Bloomfield Avenue, from the east, you can travel straight through the intersection and make the right in, which I think is probably the movement that's most desirable. We've also modeled people making a right and making a left in, which is a possible choice that you would have. If you're looking to return to the north on Grove, you can make the direct left out of.
That's what I'm questioning. I'm questioning whether or not it will be possible
will be
for
possible.
people who are coming
So-
down, just focusing on Grove Street.
Right.
I'm sure the Bloomfield Avenue traffic has options for getting in.
Right.
But the traffic going north and south on Grove Street, it seems to me there's quite a potential for congestion in that block.
So Grove Street itself will continue to flow very well, and with the restriping to 4 lanes, it'll properly order the traffic and provide the appropriate stacking on the approaches to the signals.
To the signals, no problem, but how about getting into the parking lot?
So coming northbound on Grove Street, you would have 2 lanes. Somebody going north could stop, make the left into the parking lot. They'll be able to do that. We're showing that the analysis shows that movement will
It's
work.
showing that there's no cars waiting for the traffic light or cars moving across that area.
As I've indicated, as the signals ebbs and flows, as cycles come and go, there will be times when traffic will queue back, as you know, to the intersection. At that point in time, the vehicle would not be able to go through, but with the 2 lanes, a vehicle continuing north will be able to stay in the right lane and continue to flow past. So from that standpoint, it works very well with the layout of Grove Street.
I think that's very optimistic. I guess that's my concern. I think that's a very optimistic view as to how Grove Street flows. The traffic on Grove Street is fairly heavy.
It is, and Bloomfield is heavier. And again, what I'm suggesting to you and to the board is by going to 2 full movement driveways, one on Grove and one on Bloomfield, that provides the opportunity based upon the time of day, because traffic changes through the day. We're not just designing for the peaks. There's times of the day when traffic is low, but it provides the opportunity for people to pick the paths of least resistance, so to say. So there may be times of day where you won't make a left onto Grove or not find you comfortable and make a left. And then you can go onto Bloomfield Avenue and make a right or a left. But it gives us the ability to dissipate that traffic in multiple different directions in a safe manner. And that's really the key with 2 driveways. If you start to go back to a single driveway or restrict movements, what you end up doing is concentrating traffic on other movements and create the opportunities for congestion that you wouldn't have by allowing the traffic to naturally dissipate to multiple different directions based upon the 2 driveway system.
Sounds theoretically interesting. Right now, as you mentioned, it already is 2 lanes each direction, and that's the path that I take quite often. I think you're fairly optimistic that the traffic will be accommodated the way you're hoping. So.
I have a question for you. Can you make a left if you're traveling east on Bloomfield Avenue? Can you make a left into the supermarket?
Yes, you can.
You can?
If you do that today, you'll be able to continue to do that.
Okay. So, there's an awful lot of development in this area. There's a huge project going on at the top of Bloomfield Avenue in Verona, and I would anticipate some of those people might want to use this supermarket. There's a potential project on Glenridge Avenue and Baldwin, 100 units. There's, I think you said you took into account Seymour Street.
Yep.
There's 2 projects on Glenridge Avenue, the Rosaire and the Flocker project. There's the Montclair 2. So have you taken into, and there's a lot of building that's been done in Bloomfield, 750 units around the Bloomfield train station. If this is an attractive supermarket, you're going to have an awful lot of traffic coming here. And I'm wondering if you've taken all that into account. Which projects have you taken into account in your traffic study?
So we've taken into account the most, well, there's two things. So we projected the 2020. There's two ways to do that. We've utilized a general
I'm
growth-
sorry, did you just say to 2020?
2020.
Just 2 years away from here?
Which is when this project would be open. So you design for the opening year of the
Yeah.
project. So you do that by projecting based upon the observed and historical growth patterns experienced on the road, which is about 2% per year, which is what is recorded as happening.
In Montclair area, or is that just in general?
In the Montclair area and for this type of a corridor. And then on top of that, we've loaded the specific traffic associated with the projects like Seymour Street, the Midtown parking deck, and the traffic that'll generate because of the projects around there, the Montclair Gateway and the Eastern Gateway. Those are the biggest projects that'll have the biggest influence on traffic flow in this area. And then on top of that, or below that, we also put general growth. So we've actually upped the numbers quite a bit, and that's been factored into the traffic study, yes.
I mean, I would be interested to know.
As well as our own traffic, which is, quite frankly, our own traffic is the traffic generated by those other developments. The residents of those uses become our traffic as they come to our site.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Right, so that's my concern, that you have these huge developments going on
And that's-
in peripheral areas that I don't think, from what you've just stated, you've taken into account.
Well, it is taken into account
Just
by...
in general growth, is that?
No, general growth, specific development traffic that we've worked with your consultant to identify. And then our traffic, as I said, is the traffic that are those residents and people of those developments that'll become shopping here. So that traffic is also loaded into there. So
And
it is
Mr.
a pretty healthy projection we've made.
And Mr. Peggy, just to reiterate something I think you just said a moment ago, the assumptions that you've made and the modeling that you've done, that's been reviewed and accepted by NV5 to your
Yeah, I'll let
understanding?
him speak for himself, but yes, it's been reviewed by the consultant and his letters have been submitted to the board.
Excuse me again. The slip ramp, you say that will be used by the bank? Is that what you're saying, that you're going
Yeah,
to
so
keep that?
today, as
and-
you're aware, there's that slip ramp that comes down into the lot. We're recreating that, and that'll become access only to the bank. So that'll continue to provide access to the bank.
But it looks like there's an opening on the bank's parking lot on the right, yeah.
Yeah,
So
the bank
people,
also connects, as was discussed at the last meeting, they have rights to the right in, right out on Bloomfield, and they connect to Glenridge. So as they do today, they have the same access both to Glenridge, to Bloomfield, as well as the right in. So TD Bank will have exactly the same access it has today.
so if I'm driving on Grove Street, I can make a right into this TD Bank, and then I can make a left and go behind your building and get out that way.
Theoretically,
Yeah, okay.
you can do that today.
Yeah.
Was that condition modeled?
What condition?
Turning into the TD Bank parking lot from Grove and accessing the, your new site building?
I would not expect much of our traffic doing that. I mean, they could, but
I mean, that's to me, if I'm coming eastbound on Bloomfield Ave, that seems to be the easiest way to access the residential building.
I mean, if they did it, it's a right turn in, it's an unrestricted movement, so it's not a level of service issue. It's a free flow movement for all intents and purposes.
Does that affect the amount of traffic you would expect on Grove?
It would, let's say the traffic that we anticipate to come in from Glenridge, it would just reduce that traffic flow.
Okay.
Other questions from the board?
Couple on the Glenridge side. We were talking earlier about practicality of a mid-street crossing. What are your thoughts on that?
So in this particular location, we have a traffic signal with established crossings. So that provides a good crossing right in the project area, and then we have crossings established at the legal crossing areas at Lackawanna. So we already have good pedestrian crossing at statutorily approved and legal crossing locations. I would not personally recommend or suggest that a mid-block crossing be incorporated. I don't think it's needed. There's really no, from the back of our building, there's really no desire line for any activity from here to directly cross to the post office or the mortuary. But, mid-block crossings are, while they're used when you have a real crossing desire line. I don't see it here.
Now, they're talking about this area for loading and unloading. Is it going to be sufficient for tractor trailers and for all of the smaller types of trucks like Frito-Lays?
Yes, I've been working with Mr. Webb on the layout and design of that. We believe it is correct. I did hear the earlier conversation this evening and suggesting that maybe we look at or reserve some additional area there. We'll look at that a little bit further, and if we think it's appropriate, we'll adjust that. But we heard the request earlier this evening, and I'll work with Mr. Webb to present the exhibits that have been requested.
And we also are going to condition it on a restricted left-hand turning movement for tractor trailers. Did you hear that also?
I did hear that.
Right turn
Right, well,
yeah.
I'm dyslexic. Okay, so right turn.
Yeah, I heard that. I don't see any problem with that discussion, subject to the owner's input.
Okay, well, we're going to probably impose it, so as long as you say it's safe.
Yeah, I mean, the movement is safe, and certainly from looking at the patterns in the area and where distributions might be come from, I think, as Mr. Webb suggested, we think that's probably the natural movement anyway.
I have another question. Is the likely traffic flow into the new residential building going west on Bloomfield Avenue to make the right turn in front before the TD Bank and go in that way?
Yes.
That's the
So
way.
if you're heading westbound
Yeah.
Bloomfield, you would just dive right in.
Okay.
As you can leave today. Yes.
And then coming north up Grove, the striping, so we said we're hoping that it would be 2 lanes on either side, right? So 2 lanes going north.
Correct.
Would that continue south of Bloomfield as well?
No, so what happens south is, and you start to have parking on the street.
Right,
the street.
right.
There's already, in examining it in the field, transition areas that are sort of naturally created, so it would transition back to the existing that's there, as it does today.
So coming north then, cars that would be crossing Bloomfield and making this decision on do I go straight or do I turn left depending on time of day and what I see ahead of me. The intersection there would not have a dedicated turning lane just south of Bloomfield. It would be right.
You would have a dedicated left and a dedicated through right is more than likely the way the county will stripe it, and that's the way we've modeled it, which is basically the way people are ordering themselves today. People that are making a left are stacking up, and traffic is going around them and continuing.
Yes, so just getting in the driver's seat. Going into that intersection, then there's potential for individuals to flow through and then back up saying, okay, I want to make the left. It is backed up 6, 7, however many cars to the intersection. It could block the box potentially.
No, you wouldn't block the intersection itself. The left turn would be queued to make the left. Anybody going through would be able to flow through.
No left-hand turns from the right lane.
Driveway 5.
Oh, no, at this location, no, because you'd have 2 northbound lanes. So if somebody was waiting to make a left in, you would be able to go past on the right
But if
side.
there's more than one person making you could queue up, that's the point.
Yeah,
We
you'd have to.
we don't
yeah.
expect that level of queue on that left turn in. We're basically seeing very good A, B levels of service, which is two car queues. We would not expect the queue to be extending back to.
The shopping center is dead at the moment, so there's no traffic.
It's based upon our traffic projections and analysis, and would not expect that queue to extend back to Bloomfield.
And just part of why I went back to what happened south of Bloomfield is so that if a driver is in the dedicated left turn, fine. But if they choose not to make the left and they see traffic there, they then have to make the decision, I won't turn in here, I need to get in the right lane and miss the turn that I wanted to make so that I don't block the intersection. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not following the question.
So they want to cross Bloomfield and
right.
then make the left.
Right.
So they get into the intersection, but they see, due to traffic on the left lane, the left they want to make would have them stop too close or perhaps even in the intersection because it gets backed up. They would have to get into the right lane and then go north and find another.
Yeah, I follow the scenario now that you, again, I don't foresee, based on the analysis, a queue extending back to Bloomfield. There's nothing in the analysis indicating that will happen. And I certainly don't see them come back and through the intersection and blocking the intersection. But a vehicle would have the choice to continue on in the right lane because that would be free flow. There's nothing blocking that lane.
And I realize it hasn't been decided, but if south of Bloomfield there is a left turn or option to go straight, it seems like it would be easier for individuals to say, hey, I'm going to go straight. Oh, there's a car there. Maybe I go left. So I'm just trying to figure out,
Well, more than likely on the northbound approach, to mirror the southbound approach, the county will strike a left and a
Right.
That's that whole design project that they're doing is going to address those specific conditions.
Right.
I have another question for you. You realize that there's a gas station on the corner of Elm, which becomes Grove. So you have a lot of traffic coming in and out of that gas station that's right opposite Lackawanna Plaza. Did you think about that?
Well, whatever activity that's on the streets today was in our traffic.
I know, but you have a lot more development that's going on. Your development's going to be there. You know, you keep saying that whatever's happening today, it's a dead supermarket. There's nothing there happening today.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we've reprojected, yes, in the traffic study, we have thought about that. We've reprojected for the occupancy of the supermarket and have factored and modeled all of that at the intersection and at our driveways, yes.
But my concern is that you haven't taken into account all the development that's happening, even within the outside perimeter of Montclair, where, as I said, Verona has this huge thing. If this is a successful supermarket, you're going to get a lot of traffic coming from that big development right at the borderline of Montclair and Verona.
I think that the volumes that we've projected in our traffic report are very substantial. I think we probably over-projected the amount of growth. It's just from a traffic engineering standpoint, the general growth itself is generally representative historically of what's occurring with growth patterns. When you take the general growth and then add into it specific site developments around it, you're, for the most part, probably over-projecting. We're probably looking at projections that are more closely resembled 2024, 2025, if that much. So I'm very comfortable from that standpoint.
Okay.
With regard to the traffic that this project's going to develop, we're dead accurate because we're using all the right sources and we know what we're putting in here. So that aspect of the traffic study is accurate.
I had a question about the under Grove Street. At present, the foot traffic has a tunnel that has been used from the east lot to enter to the shopping on the west lot.
Right.
And I understand that, will that still be a public access tunnel that's going under the county road of Grove Street?
So, we're actually going to visit that one at the next meeting. What's it? It's, pedestrian, but.
Yes, that's right. It's
Right,
the
but
pedestrian
we're going to
tunnel.
revisit
The
that at the next
pedestrian
hearing.
movement will still be there, yes.
Pardon?
The pedestrian movement will still be there between the two properties.
Will it be public access or will it be?
That's the specific
Right.
question, which we
Right.
have to come back on.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Can I turn to the NV5 report for a minute? Yeah, you're ready to go. I was just going to start asking some of those questions, but if you'd rather come up and ask, go right ahead.
I'll use this one. Come on, you're going to do my job for me entirely?
I just want to make sure you got up here, that's all.
Joseph Fishinger with NV5, the board's traffic consultant. I have questions at this point, but do I need to be sworn?
Don't you raise your right
Go to
hand?
sleep.
Stick your right hand.
This hour
You
is-
swear or affirm the testimony about to give this matters the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name for the record, spell
That's
last name.
Joseph Fishinger, Fishinger.
Thank you. Fire away.
Okay. Where'd you go, Carl? First of all, you talked about the restriping of Grove Street to 4 lanes, Is that something that your client will be doing as part of the project, or are you relying on somebody else to do that striping work?
That'll be a discussion with our site plan approval with the county. I suspect it'll be a combination of both, since there's a project that the county is doing, so somehow it'll marry into that, and we will do what we're required to do to accomplish that as part of the county approval. So I expect it's a combination of both.
So if we required it, you're not going to have a problem with that?
Subject to the county approval, yes.
Well, I mean, the county's going to tell you not to do it?
We don't expect so based on our conversations now.
I made a note of it, we can talk about that.
I can just add it because I was at the same meeting with Carl. They were generally supportive of that idea. In fact, they thought that's what probably should be done, but they said that they couldn't give a final answer because they first had to put in place all their designs to spend all this federal money and then see how it tied in. But their inclination was generally positive.
I was just going to say, because the testimony was just that there's 4 lanes there, and that's how the traffic plan works, so it seems to me they need it.
Yes.
That's the only way, for sure, for everyone to know if there's that.
For clarification, has the county awarded the design component of the federal grant yet? And I understand your firm is handling that, is that correct?
The contract has not been awarded yet. The on-call design contract for 2018 is actually going to another consultant, and we are a sub-consultant of that company. So we're anticipating, NV5 we're anticipating will still be involved with the design, but the county has not awarded that contract yet.
And I would agree we don't have jurisdiction over a county street, but I just think we should be looking for that, since that's consistent with testimony. But like I said, I'll hold off until we get towards the end of the case. Maybe look at the answer in the meantime.
Okay, moving on. The westbound approach at Glen Rock, the revised analysis, the latest one, I think the February 28th, shows E levels of service on that approach. Did you look at any sort of timing changes? Or can anything be done to improve that E level of service?
I did not look at a timing change since it was a minor drop, but we could check timing. It appears that there is room to move time from the northbound, southbound approaches to the eastbound, westbound. So we could do that analysis, and we could have that conversation with the county.
I'm sorry, where are you talking about? The
So-
Glen Ridge Avenue and Grove?
Yeah, so the westbound approach of Glen Ridge Avenue, which is one lane approach, that's the weakest movement in that intersection and drops into E levels of service. So the idea would be to try to take some time from the northbound, southbound to give a little more time to the eastbound, westbound movements.
And it,
Sorry, is that intersection also subject to this county grant, or is it just?
It is not.
it is not part of the county's program at this point. And similar to the striping, subject to county approval, would you agree to at least provide those timing changes to the county?
Yes.
But, and just a quick follow-up question, but to make those timing changes, the county will not have to put in new signals. They can use the existing signals infrastructure and just make the timing change.
Correct, it's just a program adjustment.
My concern is I want to make sure that the information gets to the county.
Absolutely.
So they can take it into account. In my latest review memo, I mentioned something about the possibility of 2 lanes coming out of driveway 5, which is the shopping center driveway on Grove Street. Did you look at that at all?
We did look at that to accomplish it, and it actually goes to the parking conversation, so we may want to defer it a little bit to the next time. It can be accomplished. I understand what Mr. Fishinger is asking for is that we create a left turn lane and a right turn out of the driveway. Physically, it can be done. The impact is probably the loss of 1 parking space. I wouldn't say no at this point in time, but I think we'd like to roll that into the conversation and discussion on the parking supply before we commit to one way or another.
All right, and then one other question, stepping back, when you looked at the trip generation for the site. Did you take any credits for transit or pedestrians, or did you use the numbers straight out of ITE?
Well, for the residential, one of the advantages of the site is its close proximity to the train station. So there is an adjustment for transit utilization. I believe we used about a 15% adjustment, which is appropriate and consistent with New Jersey Transit data for the immediate proximity to the train station, as well as we have some good bus service in this area. One of the advantages of developing in a urban core area.
And for the retail component?
The retail components, the analysis incorporates the captured trips from the roadway that are already traveling the roadway, which is standard. If you introduce retail along a roadway, people stop in. For instance, the supermarket, somebody stops in on their way home that's already traveling the roadway. So we did factor that characteristics into the analysis.
And then just to go into my memo real quick, and I don't know if the board followed all of the correspondence back and forth between the two of us. We went through a lot of our cars making this turn, our cars making that one turn. One that we still disagreed on was the northbound left turn movement from Grove to Glenridge. Can you address that quickly?
Yeah, what Joe's referring to is a movement leaving the grocer parking lot. If they were heading to the west on Glenridge, they really have the option of either making the left out onto Grove, coming up, making the left onto Glenridge, or making the right on the Bloomfield and coming up Lackawanna. Not unlike the reason why you were just raising the concern, we felt the easier movement is making that right out on the Bloomfield and coming up on Lackawanna. So we really don't expect very many at all of our vehicles that are oriented in that direction to make that left and come up to Glenridge when they will find it quicker and easier to make the right out onto Lackawanna. So that being said, we have modeled. We did do a test. If the traffic that we see going up that way actually came up Grove Street and made the left, it really has no impact on the signalized intersection. The issue more is the driveway. As we were discussing earlier, that's probably the more difficult movement to make out of the site is that left, and we don't think that people are going to choose to use that. So that's the only I think disagreement or difference that we had in our analysis.
What if they wanted to go, excuse me, what if they wanted to just go on Grove Street and go straight down Grove Street to
they would be able to do
Watchung or wherever they wanted to go?
We have incorporated that in the numbers, so that was reflected in the numbers and the analysis.
Also, a lot of people live in that quadrant there. That's a residential area, so they would be making a left and then going to the right on Glenridge Avenue.
Correct, and that's been incorporated.
Been adequately.
Yeah, it was just that one movement coming up and making the left. We think people are probably just going to make the right out, go up that way. Yeah.
Just for clarification.
Left, right, we expect to happen.
For clarification, under the current configuration, if you are heading east on Bloomfield Avenue, can you now make a legal left turn into the parking lot there?
Yes.
Because it's a double yellow line, isn't it? Aren't you crossing a double?
You are permitted to cross a double yellow line. You're not. Title 39 is interesting. There's some misreadings of it. You are not allowed in the same direction of travel to cross a double yellow line and continue on. You are permitted to cross a double yellow line to turn in and out of driveways, which occurs all along Bloomfield Avenue, every driveway.
But if it was striped properly, there would be a turning element there to show you to turn into that. If you're heading, again, if you're heading east on Bloomfield, you would want to see something that allows you to turn.
No, not necessarily. I mean, you have so many driveways along Bloomfield Avenue. If you did that at every driveway, you'd have no center line. So your brakes are at major intersections.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
You have anything? No.
And just one more point of clarification on Grove. Going north on Grove, the striping would remain the same north of Glenridge. Is that right?
Correct.
So we're really looking at 2 lanes on either end just for that block.
Correct. So what happens is, on the north side of Grove, it basically just transfers back, and that striping is actually pretty much there today.
And it's going back to the intersection at Bloomfield. I know that it is 1.5 blocks, I believe, from the train. There are instances where trains going one direction, another the other, with school buses and traffic in the afternoon, where you actually do back up all the way past Bloomfield. So that's just a lingering concern with this plan, that even if you have the additional striping, so there's 2 lanes then, which sometimes folks do naturally anyhow now, there could potentially still be backing up into that Bloomfield intersection. I don't know if it's clear. I know I said a few things there, but...
Yeah, I'm not expecting any of our driveways to have a negative influence on this intersection with any cues back from those driveways. There's just nothing in the analysis that's suggesting that problem.
Even at the higher traffic levels?
Not at all.
Just one more question. So, and you expect all the residents of the new building to go down and use that tunnel rather than crossing mid-block?
Yeah, I would expect people are going to take advantage of a direct crossing, a safe crossing. I certainly would not expect them to try to cross Grove Street mid-block. If anything, you would use the traffic signals like anything that's developed. But in this particular case, we have the advantage of a rather significant feature that they'll have access to directly.
Mm-hmm. Any possibility for a left turn lane out of the parking lot? I mean, into the parking lot?
Into the parking lot? In effect, by doing the 2 lanes, you're actually creating the ability to have that left queue occur while having through vehicles bypass it. So that's one of the reasons for the 4 lanes. It creates that ability. You're in effect creating that opportunity, but not completely restricting it.
Are you anticipating any signage that would tell people they can make a left turn there, or?
No,
They
it's
just
like any
know it.
driveway.
They just know it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we don't know, we try not to oversign.
Yeah.
Other questions from the board? Questions from the public concerning the traffic testimony?
Do I have to give my name?
Yes, you do.
I do. Audrey Hawley, Granada Place. I just want clarification if I understood you correctly. Traveling eastbound on Bloomfield Avenue, where you have the entrance into the parking lot, did I understand you to say that was going to be widened?
On Bloomfield Avenue?
Mhm.
No, what we are doing is we're actually shifting where the driveway is today, we're
Mhm.
shifting it a little bit to the west. That is the only change occurring on Bloomfield Avenue.
Okay, so when you shift it to the west, currently, when you go in, there's a column on either side of the entrance. When you shift it to the left, in order to shift it to the left, what's going to happen to that left column, brick column? And are those columns under any historic restrictions?
I'm going to defer. Kevin, you want to answer that specific design feature?
Sure. Actually, the columns are covered as part of the historic elements that have been evaluated at the site, and they are shifting with the driveway. So they'll be in the same configuration as they are, but they'll be in a slightly different location. So they'll be on either side of that driveway, even in the proposed condition.
Even in the proposed condition, how nice
Good evening. William Scott, 22 Fuller Avenue. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the traffic that would be flowing off of Elm Street onto Bloomfield Avenue, whether they were making a left or a right turn. Since the Bullock School is so close to that intersection, currently there's a tremendous amount of congestion, a couple times a day in the morning when the kids are going to school and things of that nature. So, there's always been a major issue when people are going off Elm Street, whether they're making that left-hand turn on the Bloomfield Avenue. There just seems to be a tremendous amount of congestion there to start with. And also, when you're on Bloomfield Avenue, in the bus stop that really fronts the supermarket, there might be 2 or 3 buses lined up at any given time in the morning, which probably would be blocking one of the entrances to the supermarket. So I see a fair amount of congestion from that standpoint.
I'm not following with regard to the bus blocking the supermarket. There is no school in the immediate proximity to the driveways on Bloomfield or Grove, so.
Well, I'm referring to the New Jersey Transit buses that have a drop-off and a pickup right in front of the supermarket.
So they would have their legal, the existing transit bus stop is at this location, which is removed, is further away, is removed from the existing driveway. So that drop-off is staying at that location, so that would not influence our existing driveway.
Okay, so you're saying the bus stop is not going to be moving. Well, the buses have, what are they, 30 feet long?
Typical bus is I think it's a 35-foot bus, a 38-foot bus, but it's stopping in proximity to the bus. It would not block the driveway.
Okay. And I'm just trying to bring to your attention, if you have 2 or 3 buses, because you've got a number of buses that come up Bloomfield Avenue, going to Verona, whatever the case might be. So, that's a very busy bus stop, pretty much throughout the entire day. And again, if you're coming off Elm Street, also making that left-hand turn, if there are school buses or whatever the case is, there just seems to be a fair amount of congestion at that point, at the intersection of Bloomfield Avenue and Elm Street. I mean, you're saying you have allotted for that, but there's additional, I don't know if your modeling took that into consideration, the traffic coming from the school.
It does. It takes it it's in our base counts that we've done, so it's reflected in that, as well as growth, as well as our traffic, so that's all incorporated into our models. This is an urban core area. There is multiple driveways, and there is traffic occurring. What we believe and what we propose to the board is a driveway system that we believe provides for ample opportunity to dissipate the traffic flows associated with the grocer in this project in a better way than previously existed, actually.
Okay. And then just one more concern. I've known the town has done major studies for surface parking within the township, and I guess the overall purpose for the studies was to maximize the land use as it related to surface parking. But this now being the largest surface parking area in the township, is that really the correct usage for that land? Should we have incorporated, I can't tell them to put another deck in, but just this being such a large surface parking lot, and I think the purpose of our studies was to tell the planners how to maximize land use, and this kind of runs counter to that recommendation in that study.
I think you're kind of mixing apples and oranges. Our studies went to municipal properties, how we could maximize the parking and public parking. This is private property. It is doesn't necessarily have to be used as a parking lot. In fact, we originally had wanted them to have this as open green space. It seems that the economic realities are dictating for the owner that in order to have a supermarket at this location, they need to have a surface parking lot that's adjacent to it. So you've got different considerations going on, basically.
And I understand. And, whether it's public property or private property, the utilization of land is still the overall goal.
Well, no, the utilization of the public property is to maximize the ability to have public parking. Private property is something different. We're trying to figure out how to have more public parking in our downtown commercial area. This is a piece of private property that has its own parking lot that it is using. Now, it doesn't need to have, doesn't need to provide public parking. It needs to provide parking for the use that goes on that particular piece of property. And we will hear from a parking expert as to how the parking that they intend to provide satisfies the requirements of the plan. But the requirements of the plan are to meet the needs of the usage on the property, not for the general downtown public area.
But it is and will be the largest surface parking lot in the township.
Just because you're using the word parking lot doesn't mean that it's the same thing.
Okay.
You're comparing two different things.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good evening, Renee Baskerville, Montclair resident. I'd just like to go back to the Glen Ridge Avenue side, and I heard several times that it's not something that we're excited about, or we don't generally like to put mid-block crosswalks, but I'm extremely concerned about the situation in front of the post office, because as it is even today, without the many trucks that may be moving to and fro in that area, on any given day, the traffic is
I'm
very...
sorry. We're at a time of the hearing where you have to ask questions. There'll be another time where you can tell us how you feel about things. Am I wrong? That's the way it's normally done. Yeah.
I'm prefacing it, I'm going to get
Oh, okay.
there.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
All right.
And
You're
so,
about to preface.
on a given day, the traffic is already extremely heavy in that area. Oftentimes, the cars are now parking in the area that's going to be occupied by the trucks. My question is
Sorry.
that we should, would it be possible for us to reevaluate putting some type of mid-block crosswalk or mid-block something there? Because even though I hear people saying, well, there's a traffic light here at Grove Street, which there is, and there's, another intersection that is appropriately crossed at the other end, these 7 or more traffic spots that are in the middle there, they're not going to take their parcels out of their car and go to the appropriate marked spaces. And so I think for safety, in order to provide the best thing that we can do, we should consider something in the mid-block there to make it safe, because the majority of the people are not going to the end. And so I'm asking, is there something else that we can consider if the body is not interested in putting a mid-block crosswalk?
The question is to the developer and their expert, not to the board.
To anybody
No, not
that
to
wants
the
to
board. It's
answer
to
it.
right now, we're cross-examining the applicant.
Okay.
The applicant's witness, so
All right.
that's the question to him.
So I posed the question.
He's right behind you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're there and I'm here. I get that.
Again, to summarize my prior testimony, I would not recommend, and this applicant is not proposing to install a mid-block crosswalk. I don't think it's an appropriate location. There are 2 existing crosswalks that are in appropriate locations. Any further action by the municipality would be an action by the governing body. It would be not associated with this project.
Is there a mid-block crosswalk on the Grove Street side here?
No.
Okay, so there's nothing that's allowing the residents to cross on Grove Street over on that side. They have to go to the end of the block too if they wanted to cross.
The residents have the ability to use the existing tunnel.
Okay, but not up above the street.
There's really no reason to. And again, mid-block crosswalk is not something that is used very lightly just because you want to accommodate a movement that seems likely. There are appropriate accommodations provided at the signalized intersections. and they are in immediate proximity. So from a traffic engineering and safety standpoint, that is the appropriate way to accommodate the pedestrian movements through the site. In our case, we have the additional advantage of the tunnel.
Thank you.
Jarvis Hawley, Granada Place. Can you tell us how many in your traffic impact plan, how many projects that you've taken in consideration? Can you kind of itemize them, you know, of all the projects that are pending going around that would be massive diversions or minor diversions? Have you accommodated all those in your impact? I'm even talking about not just projects in Montclair, but in the surrounding township going on with Carmel's question.
So, yeah, I don't have a list of all the specific projects that are being developed. The regional growth is addressed by a general growth rate that we apply to the road system. Specific traffic, as requested by the board's traffic consultant, included traffic in the immediate adjacent area, which is the Seymour Street project. It's the Midtown parking deck. It's the Montclair Gateway plan, and it's the Eastern Gateway plan. Those are immediately adjacent projects that will load traffic specifically on these road links, aside from general growth, and that's been factored into our traffic studies. So you haven't incorporated in your traffic study the pending project that's going to go on at the major regional hospital that we have in town. It's reflected by the general growth. I mean, that's the purpose of a general growth, is it encompasses that type of activity that's occurring in the region.
I'm asking you specifically, have you had Hackensack Mountainside there, because they're getting ready to do a big project of offices and everything else, which is kind of adjacent to the area.
Can I just also, that's absolutely true. This is an area of specific, unusual development. It's just not just your regular old growth that's going on. So I'm surprised that you haven't taken that into consideration, that they're all around, as he's saying as well, that there's all kinds of development planned.
And
you've taken the ones that
are really to this area,
that are within a 4-block radius or something, but there's within a quarter mile, there's like huge development going on.
And that type of growth, the 2% per year growth, is reflective of that type of activity, because those projects will also have their traffic dissipate in multiple different routes. So, to be fair, I'm reasonably confident that what we've projected is a very conservative projection of growth. It's in the area.
Well, I was just wondering, could you have a more liberal instead of conservative projection of growth? Because, again, I preface that it was a regional hospital. A lot of traffic go there. Now they're expanding it. It's going to be more than 2%. So I'm just saying, could you incorporate that into a major impact plan? Because that's
I don't believe the traffic study needs to be adjusted for that. I think it provides a good snapshot of what's occurring in the area. The other thing I would indicate is the county, as they design their improvements, will be taking into account the overall picture in the area from that standpoint. But I think the traffic study as it stands has been prepared and is very reflective and a snapshot of what will occur here.
And Mr. Pankey, just to clarify on the conservative, liberal usage of terminology, when you say that your study was conservative, do you mean conservative, right, as in much more cars on the road impact, as opposed to, in your definition, liberal would mean we took liberties, as in suggesting the traffic may not be as bad as it could be in real time?
Probably opposite.
Or another word could use more expansive. I mean, because it is, besides all the other growths that are going on in town, that growth is maybe second to the plans of the Lackawanna.
The other thing you got to
of
recognize,
essential
though,
services.
there are impacts that are analysis that'll be done by those projects addressing their impacts. As I started the whole discussion this evening, one of the key things that maybe we should go back to is in terms of traffic generation, this project exists. Absent this application before this board, you could reoccupy all of that retail space and continue to operate it as is. And one of the first things I indicated this evening is in terms of levels of traffic, if that were to occur, and then by comparison to what we're proposing, we're actually in a little bit of better condition. We're actually decreasing the potential traffic generation from this site. But absent that, this project previously already generated traffic on the road systems historically.
Just as a note, most of these projects are all occurring at the same time, in the same span, start and completion, all in this same span of development to completion. So people got to get together because it's going to impact.
Hi, James Cotter, Clover Hill Place. I have two very site-specific questions. The first is, if you're going west on Bloomfield Avenue and there's a traffic generated on Grove Street heading north, was there anywhere in your traffic plan that anticipated that people might cut through the back of the east parcel to avoid Grove Street and therefore access Glenridge Avenue to head north into town?
No, and we don't expect that movement would occur. There's nothing in our analysis that's indicating that people would find that desirable.
You said before that traffic finds its easiest, flow. Again, if Grove Street is backed up, the easiest flow to go north would be to cut through the back of the parcel. Is there any virtue at all in cutting off that egress by putting some sort of barrier at the TD Bank point so that you could not cut through the back of that east parcel?
No, we don't think we need to manage the lot in that way. I wouldn't expect that to be a problem for management of the property.
Okay. I do expect that to be a problem, and we're hoping that the board would address that. The second, very site-specific issue is something that Mr. Heller alluded to before, and I wonder if you worked with the other gentleman in thinking about the ways in which truck traffic would access that loading dock. If I may. If the tractor trailers come onto this road, in order for them to back into this bay, they have to, I don't know how to describe this, but they have to go forward into Glenridge Avenue and then back up into the bay.
No, it's actually just a cleaner movement. They come up and then back straight in.
Okay, well, even if they have to go here, they're backing into traffic into the bay. I don't know whose testimony was before, maybe it was Mr. Webb, said that these bays previously had been articulated this way. Is there any virtue in having the tractor trailers come in, and forgive me, Mr. Heller, they would come into your property and back into bays, as they currently do? Because otherwise,
that's exactly the problem.
Come up Grove Street, Glenridge Avenue, back up into traffic where the post office is, into these bays.
Yeah, that's a configuration that hasn't been working, particularly for the adjacent property owner, and actually doesn't work for the current layout of the types of tenants that we've been talking to for the site. What we propose, we believe, works, is efficient, and actually addresses some of the prior problems that have existed on this property and our neighbor's property.
Have you explored the legality of a tractor trailer backing up into traffic from Glenridge Avenue into that site?
It's a public right-of-way, happens all the time.
It's a legal means by which tractor trailers could back up into traffic to access that site?
You can move in and out of driveways on a public right-of-way, yes.
I can't imagine that the township is cool with tractor trailers backing up into traffic. Could we find that out?
What's that?
Could we, as the attorney for the,
I don't think there's a legal answer to that. I think that's engineering and traffic.
It
With all
occurs
due
throughout.
respect. Thank you for asking me that.
Okay. I think we should probably find that out.
There's no prohibition.
Okay. Yeah.
Carrie Eller, 1 Greenwood. Just bear with me, just history. Prior to me, there used to be a fence for Brian's edification, for your edification. The trucks always did load, as Brian testified or identified earlier. They did come in, excuse me. But when the fence came down,
Can you,
after us-
wait, hold on
this
just
was
a
the
minute,
old car
Carrie.
dealership.
Carrie, hold on. Can you give Carrie the
Yeah.
microphone?
Pointer, thank you.
No, the microphone.
Oh, microphone.
I want the microphone.
Pointer, stay here.
I want to be able to record this.
Give me the,
Take that, though. Got it?
no, I haven't used one.
But remember, you have to lead into a question,
I am, I
okay?
promise. I was gonna get, I'm just asking. There used to be a fence here. So the trucks did used to come in, but they would pull back out, I don't know your name, the gentleman, and they sort of made a U-turn within the parking lot and, came in toward the fence and then backed up this direction. When the fence came down, they came underneath, and yes, it became convenient for a lot of years. My question, that's just in terms of history, what used to go on. My question again, Mr. Engineer, I'm sorry, I didn't recall your name, but in terms of the mid-block crossbrook, the question is, do we have I've seen your 119 pages of traffic work. Do we have an actual count of number of vehicles on Glen Ridge Avenue between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. each direction?
Well, we have hourly volume.
We multiply that out by more or less times 10?
It wouldn't be that. Your peak hours are actually quite pronounced. Hourly wise, there's probably peak direction, roughly 3 to 330 vehicles peak direction on any given peak hour.
So when the articulation drawings are done, I'm sure it'll be done in the context of how long it takes to do the movement to back up and to come in, and what happens again when vehicles come behind that vehicle, and then if another truck comes in and can't get out the vehicles behind. My question to, again, is the possibility of looking at restricting large trailer truck traffic during the day. There has to be other evidentiary throughout the state of restrictions. We know in residential areas, not going to allow it at night. The question is, can we possibly look into, I know we don't have the supermarket, the possibility of restricting large trucks during the day?
We're not proposing it, and quite frankly, that could impact the ability to attract a user of this site. They basically, to have a successful center, it needs to function. It needs to function in accordance with how they operate their facilities.
What about restricting the deliveries to avoid the peak hours of traffic, which you say are pronounced?
Again, in general, tractor trailers are not delivering during peak hours, but to actually create and impose restrictions.
So if in general they're not,
For my client.
yeah, if in general they're not really delivering during peak hours, then it shouldn't be a hardship to consider restricting it. And since they're radio dispatched, they seem to be, or at least radio controlled or communicating, there should be a way to schedule them around the peak hours if we know what those peak hours are, and you're saying that they're pretty pronounced, right?
Let me jump in on that, Mr. Chairman. We did have conversations, and again, most of this is, when I say we, the Hampshire group, although I've been privy to it, with all of the various potential supermarket operators. The idea, as I've said to Carrie, because we talked about it with them after you brought it up to me, of restricting during entire daytime or nighttime was problematic for all of them. We didn't ask that specific question you just raised, and we're glad to do that.
There's all sorts of municipalities in the metropolitan area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that have time restrictions on when you can come into them and when you can do things.
We didn't
And
ask
again,
that
it doesn't,
specific.
so,
We
you
will
know,
do
that may
Get
be
back
something
to
that can at least partially address it. It's not going to, the fact of the matter is that your proposal is going to cause when a truck is going to pull into the loading dock, it's going to stop traffic. There's going to be traffic because there's always traffic on Glenridge Avenue. It might be one car, it might be two cars. You know, in busy hours, it might be 5 or 6 cars. But it's going to stop traffic. And it's all really going to depend on how well the driver is able to negotiate in and out. But I mean, this happens. It's not a unique situation. Certainly, it happens all over Manhattan, and by no means are we living in Manhattan. But in any places that, you know, where your supermarkets are in urban areas and they're not restricted to strip malls, you know, there are times when the trucks are going to block traffic, either pulling out or backing in. You know, it's unavoidable. So the idea is to minimize it, and to try and maximize the safety factor, minimize the impact on the community and in particular the neighbors.
May I also add, on Glenridge Avenue, there are 3 new developments proposed, the Diva Lounge, the Rosaire, and the Faulkner development. 2 actually on all 3, right on Glenridge Avenue. So I'm not sure you took those developments into account when you were doing your studies, because that would certainly impact the traffic flow on Glenridge Avenue.
Last question, I won't keep you. Just back to, again, depending upon the restrictions, this is a post office that has no parking. The parking is Glenridge Avenue, and it's my parking lot, it's your parking lot. There are more people coming. It's becoming a very walking, there's a question, a very walking downtown. To not do something, or to please consider something, whether it's demarcation of road surface with brick, flashing, people are crossing there, as Ms. Baskerville pointed out, despite we're widening the apron. I would just like to again ask another opportunity, another expert to ask, please consider, depending upon how this truck plays out, and even with that, to please consider some modification to recognize that there is only going to be more people crossing there, not less people, and you have a wider driveway apron than is there now. Just in the name of public safety, would you please consider that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the public?
One more, Mr. Chairman.
Joe Fishinger, NV5. Not to beat a dead horse, Carl, but with the operation of these loading zones, will there be any flaggers or any other employees from the supermarket out there when the truck is backing in? Or is the driver just going to put his reverse lights on and pray there's nobody behind him? Is there provisions for employees to come out to assist with getting the truck into the loading dock?
We don't have any specific operators, so I can't speak to how a management would work, but I would anticipate, like any location, it would be up to the driver. I mean, that's standard. It happens.
And that's probably something that would have to be dealt with, I really think, on the individual operator of the supermarket, to have some rules in place that, you know, would preserve safety. I'm sure a truck driver is not going to just pray that there's nothing behind it and back up, you know, but you know, by the same token, if it works more efficiently, if it's something that might even be built somehow into a condition, maybe into the what's the agreement that we're entering into? The developer's agreement, you know, that, you know, certain rules be put in place for the operation of the site in general. It might be able to address some of these concerns. Thank you. So that's it for the
So
evening,
I think,
right?
yeah, so I know we're past the 10:30 mark, so I would say we're...
All right. When are we picking this up, Janice?
Well, unfortunately, I have 2 other applications that we have to start on May 7th, which is our May meeting. And the second meeting would be May 21st, which I'm sure we'll probably have to do some wrap-up of the hospital application. So, how much longer do you think, Mr. Troutner, how much longer do you think this will be?
So we still have parking testimony, which is substantial, and there's obviously a few open issues which we've indicated we're going to come back on. And also Mr. Stevie, on an architectural standpoint, will also be presenting some revisions
I think
that
it
were
would be a
discussed.
full meeting.
That's at least one meeting, yes.
It's a full meeting.
Yes.
We have to do these other applications. They really have been sitting for quite a while, and we need to start them. So.
What do we have? What do we have? They're on for the
They wouldn't, the 16th.
The May.
The April 16th meeting, they couldn't make, so we're not having a third.
By notice, right.
Yeah, we're not having a third meeting this month.
Right.
Just the regular meetings.
So we may. Looks like we may need a third meeting next month
Right.
instead.
And my suggestion would be to schedule the special meeting for this application.
Yeah. Well, that's the only reason why we would be having a special meeting for this application. So,
It's all about food.
what we're going to wedge this in between
Yep. We only have the 14th.
May 14th.
How does that work for you guys?
I may be out of town, but I'm not sure.
So what are the next meetings?
But that doesn't mean that the show has to stop.
May 7th is our regular meeting. We're
Hard to say. It's hard to say.
April 23rd, May 7th,
May 7th.
You know,
now May 14th?
May 14th. Does the 14th, I'm going to see, does the 14th work for you?
That works for us.
Does it work for the members of the board?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it seems to work for, I think you've got a quorum, you've got a majority, so let's schedule it for then.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everyone.
All right. Janice has indicated that we don't have to do the stormwater management training this evening.
That's something you do on your own. I sent you a link to the online.
Oh, is that, okay.
It's an online training thing. You can go through it as quickly as you want. All I need from each of you is a copy of that certification that you
Okay.
did it.
Is there a time frame to get it done?
July 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
Plenty of time.
Okay? So if you can't find the link, I did it myself. Just if you can't find it, contact me and I'll send it to you.
How long does it take?
45 minutes, but it all depends on, there's little banners, and if you click the little banners, it might take longer.
Okay.
And at the end, it asks you to download documents. Don't bother to download the documents. I downloaded them. I talked to Tom Watkinson about integrating some of the questions in those documents into our applications. Because the premise of the training is to train you to review the applications and ask all those questions. It's like 8 pages of questions. My opinion is, I don't think you need to ask those questions. They need to
Answer them.
answer them.
Right.
Okay?
So we
So
can
we'll make
give
it part
them-
of our application, and then
give them-
Tom will be
yes.
able to say what has not been addressed.
That sounds the most efficient way to do that.
Okay, but the whole premise is to really encourage best management practices for stormwater management.
All right.
Okay?
How are our bills?
I see no issues with the bills.
Second.
And I
All
would
in
move to
favor?
approve them.
Opposed? All in favor? Opposed? Okay,
Aye.
great.
All right.
All right.
Right, everyone, thank you.
Okay.